Chapter 9:12. How do you think I feel about you? Jiang Zuo glanced over, the color in his eyes darkening. I just feel indignant, don't misunderstand your position. If it had been in the past, Shui Yaoyao would have been heartbroken. But now that she knew the truth, she said, I've never misunderstood anything. I'm just reminding you because if something happens, it won't be good for either of us. Similarly, I won't have any illusions about you anymore. I've said what I should have said that day. Actually, thinking about it, it's quite funny that we have such a contract, isn't it? I earned quite a bit from the competition this time. If you have any thoughts, we can use other methods to solve some problems. Jiang Zuo laughed, reaching out to extinguish the cigarette in the ashtray, the coldness at the corner of his lips obvious. That's right, I forgot that you're already a small god in the esports world. Why? After gaining fame, you feel that your past is too unbearable and you want to get rid of it. Jiang Zuo leaned over, his breath hitting the back of Shui Yaoyao's ears. The game has already begun, as for when it ends, it's up to me, not you. With that, Jiang Zuo stood up, walking out of the room. The aura emanating from his back made some of the staff in the nightclub afraid to take a step forward. Anyone could tell that young Master Jiang wasn't in a good mood, which was why he came to the nightclub to drink. Now, it seemed even worse than before. He had clearly brought a girl in. How did he end up like this? Shui Yaoyao glanced at the door that had been slammed shut, the sound still echoing. She roughly knew what Jiang Zuo was thinking. He had always been a leader. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone to end what he wanted to do. It probably had to do with his pride. Shui Yaoyao stood up, walking out. When the nightclub staff's gaze landed on her collar, she seemed to realize something. She blushed, lowering her head to tidy her clothes before walking towards the Supreme Alliance card bag. She had thought that if he left just like that, the agreement would be cancelled. What Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected was that in less than 2 minutes, she received a message from Jiang Zuo just as she walked down the corridor. The content was for her to greet the people from Supreme Alliance. Someone would pick her up and they would meet at the usual place. She had been going there every Thursday since they had agreed to meet at the old place. That was Jiang Zuo's own house, probably no one knew he had such a house. Some people said that he often kept beauties in there. However, she reckoned that if those people knew that she was also a member of the fragrance of heaven and earth, they would definitely be surprised. After all, among the people he knew, her appearance was indeed very ordinary. Shui Yaoyao had always been self-aware. Especially in this aspect. Even more so. She's on Thursday. He just didn't know what day it was for the others. Even though he had promised her that he would only do it with her when they were together. But today's scene made Shui Yaoyao feel like she didn't understand Jiang Zuo at all. The person she used to know was like her best memory. When it stopped at that moment, she would always mistake it for warmth. Chapter 9:13. Someone as warm as a brother would only exist when nothing had happened. When it happened, she also truly understood his thoughts and the gap between the two of them. Feelings couldn't be forced. She sincerely hoped that they could be clear that she wasn't someone who clung to anyone. Shui Yaoyao didn't reply to the message. Today was an important day for everyone. She didn't want to be absent from Supreme Alliance's victory celebration. She believed that he would find someone to replace her. But Supreme Alliance was irreplaceable to her. Moreover, Highness Zhou was so smart, it was probably because she didn't reply. Very quickly, the next day's WeChat came. Shui Yaoyao glanced at it and sent a few words over. Find someone else today. After the National League, I will abide by our agreement. Find someone else. When Jiang Zuo saw the 3 words, his eyes turned extremely cold. What kind of person did she think he was? Or was it because she didn't care anymore and it had nothing to do with her who he was with? Jiangsu sat in the back seat of the extended black car. The interior of such a luxurious car was very grand. Beside him was a cigarette lighter and a wine glass holder. He tightened his grip on the phone. That man from the Fu family was really very important to her. The driver could clearly see his young master's unhappy expression, but he didn't dare to say anything. He watched as the person threw the phone in his hand to the side and disappeared into the night. Not going there today, back to the courtyard. Yes, young master. Even though the driver was shocked, he didn't show it. But his young master had said that he was going to pick up second miss today. Now it seemed like they weren't on good terms again. Outside the car window, the night continued. The unique liveliness of a nightclub hadn't subsided at all. It was the reverberation music that could make people high. The DJ wore black headphones and played with one hand while the other led the rhythm. It was like a sleepless night that made people excited. But it was such a night that things happened easily. There were probably many benefits to being good-looking. For example, he didn't know how many waves of girls had come over to buy the youngster a drink. Qin Mo was even sent a huge fruit platter. Perhaps it was because Jiangsu wasn't the one serving Qin Mo this time. He didn't go to the private room along the corridor. Instead, he sat at the two sides of the stage, which was why people thought he was just here to play. After all, Qin Mo was wearing his private clothes. He had shed the business suit and the team battle uniform. All that was left was his original color. He was noble with a hint of indifference. It was the kind of temperament that attracted girls. Even the curve of his chin made people want to stare at him again and again. At this time, Coco always sighed. They were both university students, but why was there such a huge difference between him and Captain? In fact, even if they were all esports almighties, only Coco had appeared more often. Hence, Coco was wearing a black mask and hugging a bottle of wine to get drunk. He was frustrated that he couldn't show off his beautiful face. Speaking of which, it was probably because of his cold aura that not many people got close to him. On the other hand, Bojio was surrounded by 3 to 4 girls, all of them blushing as they chatted with her. This was what Shui Yaoyao saw when she came back. Bojio smiled and said to the girls, "My friend is back, please give up your seat." Even if the girls had other thoughts, they could only leave since she had already said that. But before they could take a step, it happened. Not far away, a man with a thick gold chain and a handbag on his arm walked over aggressively. Behind him were 3 or 4 people who looked like underlings. He swept a glance at one of the girls and pulled her back. He raised his chin and glanced at the silver-haired youngster in front of him. "Do you know who she is? How can you drink her wine so casually?" Lin Feng was tired of looking at the girls and wanted to talk to Little Spade about brotherly matters. The so-called brotherly matters were probably to ask the gays what they were thinking. Why didn't they like soft girls? Why did they have to like guys who were as hard as them? He hadn't expected that before he could put on a serious expression, someone had come to ruin his plans. The naive Lin Feng's definition of a good thing was a little unusual. But that didn't affect his desire to beat them up. The man with the gold chain was still pretending to be cultured. "Look at your looks, you haven't been around much. How are you going to settle the score for flirting with someone's girlfriend? Shouldn't you talk about it?" Bojio swirled the wine glass, looking like a nocturnal prince. She laughed. "What do you want to talk about? I'm not an unreasonable person who dares to drink anyone's wine, right?" The man with the gold chain glanced over. Immediately, someone passed a bottle of wine over. It was white and had a high purity. "Since you like to drink so much, finish the whole bottle in front of me." The man with the gold chain sounded calm, his entire aura imposing. Usually, the students would have given in when they saw him like this. A bunch of people who came from nowhere were acting so high profile just because they were handsome. Weren't they asking for a beating? The golden-chained man wanted to teach them a lesson and let them know how high the heavens were and how deep the earth was. But the man didn't expect the youngster to not show any signs of fear. Instead, she looked at him and lifted her lips. "What if I say I don't want to drink?" The gold-chained man's eyes darkened, and he looked very dangerous. Looks like some people just want to suffer before they realize how ridiculous their words are. With that, he glanced to his left and right. The two of them clenched their fists, rushing towards her with a murderous aura. But before they could even get close to the young man, their feet hit the ground, and they fell face first onto the ground. It was Chin Mo. He was still holding onto the wine glass, but his long legs were stretched out. The man with the gold chain was infuriated when he saw the situation. Look, this bunch of people refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack, the man with the gold chain ordered. The people around him pounced towards the youngster like a swarm of bees. They were obviously relying on their numbers and familiarity with the place to get rid of someone. The man with the gold chain was still waiting for the youngster to beg for mercy. Just then, the youngster in front of him bent over and kicked beautifully. While she dodged the man's attack, she reached out and pulled him over forcefully. The youngster's movements were swift, so swift that the man with the gold chain couldn't retaliate in time. The others froze. After their legs were kicked by the youngster, they realized one thing: these people weren't to be trifled with. Bojo didn't mind. Since things were smashed during the fight, he would let the troublemaker pay for it. With that in mind, the youngster grabbed onto the gold-chained man who was about to retreat. Her actions were so cool that Lin Feng, who was seated at the side, wasn't of any use. She watched as the rest of the men were pushed down and there was only one left. Bojo exerted strength in her wrist. She grabbed onto his collar with one hand and lifted him up. "Do you still want me to finish the whole bottle? Do you know who I am? Do you know whose place this is?" The man with the gold chain was used to being arrogant and had no intention of holding back. "How dare you fight here? Where do you think this is? Where do you think you can come and go as you please? Look at my relationship with Jiangzhua. How dare you challenge me?" That explained why the man with the gold chain was so fearless. It was because of their relationship. But if he was really close to young Master Jiang, how could he not know the Almighty? It was highly possible that the man with the gold chain was just a friend of young Master Jiang. He was flaunting his relationship with Jiangzhua in front of the Almighty. Bojo treated it as a joke. The man with the gold chain didn't change his attitude towards them. Especially the person who had been sitting in the innermost corner. He lifted the corners of his lips as though he was mocking him. The man with the gold chain couldn't tolerate it. When he saw the waiters and bodyguards, even the manager was alerted and ran over. Instantly, he gained confidence. In reality, she had tried her best to reduce the area of influence during the fight. However, the big golden chain did not seem to think that it was time to reduce the area of influence. Instead, his words made many people look in his direction. After the manager heard the news, he hurriedly ran to the card box. The gold-chained man pulled him over. "Manager Li, look. These young people like to cause trouble. People like them should be chased out. It's good that you're here to teach them a lesson." After saying that, the golden-chained man glanced at the group of people again. It was as if he was saying, "Did you see that? If I want you to leave, it's just a matter of saying a few words." Regardless of whether it was Bojo or Shui Yaoyao, they could all read the meaning behind his gaze. "Actually, it doesn't matter if Manager Li doesn't come. I can handle these people myself." Intentionally or unintentionally, the man flaunted his connections. "But I'm really thankful that you came all the way here just for me. However, the gold-chained man didn't expect Manager Lee to walk past him and ask Qin Mo, "Young Master Qin, do you need me to change your seat? Or what do you want to do?" Before Boss Jiang left, he instructed us to take good care of your card box. I just left for a short while, I didn't expect this to happen. Young Master Qin. The moment Manager Lee said that, the golden-chained man realized that he had done something stupid. He had never expected that young Master Qin would be sitting there. Wasn't he usually in a private room? Why was he so unlucky today? He had bumped into him sitting outside. Moreover, when he thought about what he had done and said to them, the golden-chained man's face turned red and white. It was embarrassing enough that he had mistakenly thought that Manager Lee had come specially for him. Now that he thought about it, he had even flaunted his relationship with young Master Jiang in front of young Master Qin. At this moment, the golden-chained man wanted to find a hole to hide in. While his heart was pounding, there was also an indescribable sense of awkwardness. The girls were still standing at the side. When they heard Manager Lee call Qin Mo, young Master Qin, they realized something and looked over with a different gaze. Qin Mo rarely came to this kind of place. Even if he did, he would order a private room. It was rare for him to sit outside like this. Some of them had just delivered fruit platters here, and many rich people had said that they had their eyes on someone in this group. Now, it seemed that none of them were people that they could get close to. As for Qin Mo, he lifted his lids and glanced at the man in the gold chain. His voice was calm and there was an indescribable indifference in it. "There is one thing you are mistaken about. In the future, look after your girlfriend well. Don't give her alcohol so casually. Not everyone will drink the alcohol she gives. If you can't look after your own woman well, you will vent your anger on others who are more outstanding than you. Boss Hong, do you think you are a man?" Boss Hong was a golden-chained man. His words were a slap in the face. Boss Hong was shocked that this young Master Qin knew him. Apart from the shock, he thought about why everyone said that young Master Qin wasn't someone to be trifled with. That one sentence had shaped his behavior for the day. It sounded a little perverted. Moreover, this matter was caused by this little girlfriend of his who was not well behaved. Qin Mo was just short of saying that it was his girlfriend's problem and it had nothing to do with others. Boss Hong turned his head and saw that many people were looking at him. He had really lost all his face. This was a place he frequented, which was why he knew Jiangzhua. In some aspects, there was no distinction between the two sides. But because of this, when the young master of the Qin family said that, not only had he been cuckolded, but he was also narrow-minded and narrow-minded. F*ck, we're all cultured people like that. It didn't sound like much, but when he thought about it, it was more lethal than dealing with him directly. This young Master Qin was really too. Boss Hong wasn't well educated and couldn't find the right words to describe him. Bo Jiu shook her head regretfully. In terms of shamelessness, she really couldn't compare to the Almighty. When he saw the youngster shaking her head, Qin Mo arched a brow. His voice was calm. "Come over." It was obvious who he was talking to. Boss Hong wouldn't foolishly stay there to be a target. After apologizing, he quickly left, mainly because he was afraid that young Master Qin would say something else. Originally, he didn't want to do anything, he just wanted to scare them, but who knew that he would be the one being scared? Chapter 9:14. Bo Jiu arched a brow. She walked over. Qin Mo didn't hold back at all. He sat there and pulled her over. His thin lips were extremely close to her nose, just a few tenths of an inch away. Their posture instantly attracted a group of people's attention. Especially when the youngster leaned forward, the sharp edges of his face were covered with tiny fur. It was clean and fair, carrying an indescribable handsomeness. The two of them were in such a position, it was too much like the prelude to a kiss. It's too easy to attract attention. Bojo. She really didn't know what to say. After all, the Almighty was the best at attracting attention. The two of them were already handsome. Now, they were displayed in such a suggestive manner in front of everyone. Some of the beauties who had wanted to buy the youngster a drink stopped in their tracks. There were also some who had hoped for the appearance of the legendary young Master Qin. Now that he had finally appeared, they all froze on the spot with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. For a moment, everyone was looking at the card holder in the center. Their mouths were wide open, filled with indescribable shock. They really didn't think that the two of them would have that kind of relationship. After all, both of them were very handsome. The aura they exuded was rare as well. If these two people were indeed abnormal in that aspect, it was really a waste of heavenly gifts. Could it be that they were thinking too much? Perhaps the two of them were just brothers, but which good brother would use such a posture to talk? The girls seemed to hear the sound of their hearts breaking. There were some who didn't give up. They held on to their wine bottles and bit their lips, continuing to look around. Qin Mo exerted force, bringing the youngster's face closer to him. I don't like to fight. It's tiring to deal with another boss Hong. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It didn't seem like there was any problem at all. But who would believe his words? Even if there were 10 more boss Hong, they would still have to kneel in front of their captain. The captain had always been expressionless when it came to dealing with people. Just those few words just now had already revealed this characteristic of his. Now, he actually said it was tiring to deal with him. Such an excuse. What exactly was he trying to do? Just when the Supreme Alliance members were feeling puzzled, Qin Mo used force and pressed the youngster down beside him. Sit here, in case your face attracts more nobodies. Bojo, that seat was really in the innermost area. She was almost in the same group as Coco. There was no exposure at all. But it didn't matter where she sat. The only difference was that the Almighty's legs were tightly pressed against hers. She didn't know if it was intentional or not. Seeing the youngster sit beside Qin Mo, the onlookers gave up completely. It wasn't that they were thinking too much, it was the truth. It was no wonder that no matter how beautiful the girl was, the young man didn't drink at all. Moreover, young Master Qin had always been cold and indifferent to everyone. Once a woman clung to him and didn't give up, that woman would be rejected the next day. It was the same for all of them. In the past, they always thought it was because of young Master Qin's personality, but now it seemed like it was because young Master Qin liked boys. Such a thing was definitely explosive, but no one dared to expose it. But someone like young Master Qin was gay. It wasn't just sad, some people's dreams of being rich were shattered. There were many people who had woken up from their dreams, including the girls who wanted to continue treating Bojo. After all, the youngster seemed like the one being kept, the toasts lessened instantly. Finally, there weren't as many people using the excuse of toasting to look at Bojo. But at this moment, no one noticed. Every time Bojo moved, Qin Mo would move closer. On the third time, the Almighty tilted his head, his voice calm. Why are you so restless? Do you want to sit on my lap? Bojo, the Almighty sounded as though she was the one taking advantage of him. Mainly, the Almighty hadn't spoken loudly, but it was clear enough for the surrounding people to hear. Everyone quietened down, lifting their heads to drink silently. Their gazes drifted over, especially Lin Feng. These two really didn't know how to restrain themselves, especially Little Spade. Bojo didn't have to guess. Once she saw Lin Feng's gaze, she knew he had misunderstood something. After all, she was the aggressor in everyone's eyes. If she took the initiative, it wouldn't be wrong. But the Almighty's tricks. Bojo glanced up at Qin Mo. It was really shameless. Qin Mo allowed the youngster to size him up. There wasn't any hint of discomfort on his face. He was still indifferent and noble. The more he looked, the more she took the initiative. In the end, Bojo gave up. The Almighty was so handsome. In terms of looks, he was indeed able to take the initiative, regardless of gender. So be it if his long legs were pressed against hers, it wasn't as though they hadn't done more intimate positions before. She could touch his thighs and make the crime of taking advantage of him a reality. Since she was already the one taking advantage, it would be a waste not to touch him. After thinking it through, the youngster's expression became more mischievous. She placed her left arm on the sofa behind her, her right hand naturally placed on his long and slender leg. Speaking of which, it did seem like a domineering CEO teasing his secretary. It wasn't bad for her. Especially when her hand was placed on the Almighty's thigh, she could clearly feel his body freeze for a moment. Bojo had always been more than happy to be able to influence his actions. She still remembered the time when she had first met the Almighty. She had only needed to blow into his ear and he would go berserk, wanting to stuff her into a bucket like trash. It was rare to see an Almighty like this. Anyone could tell that the youngster was a hedonistic son, the smile on her face obvious. Who knew what she was up to? The moment she placed her hand on his thigh, Chin Mo's hand paused. When he saw that she had no intention of moving her hand away, his gaze deepened. There wasn't any change in the contours of his face, it was still chiseled. However, his eyes seemed to be penetrated by something, they were extremely deep. A certain someone was undoubtedly plucking the hair off a tiger's head, but she didn't seem to be aware of it. She smiled at him. Brother Mo's tofu isn't bad. The youngster's hand slid down the side of his thigh. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. He put down the wine glass in his hand, leaned closer to the person, and held her wrist with his other hand. Bojo assumed that the Almighty wanted her to move her hand away. Unexpectedly, he lowered his voice, his breath landing beside her ear. He tilted his handsome face, his pale lips pressing against the hair behind her ear. The minty tobacco scent was extremely obvious. You aren't touching the right place, go further down, a little towards the center. A little further down and in the middle. Bojo lowered her eyes. She glanced at the man who was about to lift his head due to her actions. She was extremely familiar with the feeling of her blood slowly swelling up. That thing had tormented her for an entire night. Most importantly, she had only taken a glance at it, but it seemed to have grown a little bigger. Bojo couldn't help wanting to retreat, but the Almighty held on to her wrist. When she glanced up, she saw his eyes that were as deep as the night sea and that face that was incomparably elegant no matter where she looked at it. Logically speaking, there would definitely be people noticing them when they were so close to each other. Indeed, there would be people noticing, but in a noisy nightclub, it wasn't strange for them to be so close to each other. Moreover, Lin Feng was still thinking about how to win against Yunhu, hence, he used all his backup plans. He got Coco to stare at Yunhu's spot and give him hints. Uncle Ian had drunk quite a lot and was smoking. Shui Yaoyao wasn't paying attention, she swiped open her phone screen and waited for it to dim. Therefore, no one noticed the movements of these two people. In addition, the two of them were indeed sitting very close to each other. No matter how intimate they were, it wouldn't make people feel anything. On the contrary, just looking at the two of them sitting together and talking with their faces close to each other's ears was too pleasing to the eye. The tips of her ears turned red, her palms burning hot, especially when he held onto her hand and moved it downwards. It didn't feel like she was teasing him, instead, it felt like she was being teased. Why? You were touching me with all your might just now, but now you don't dare to. Chin Mo's voice was a little hoarse as though he was warning her. How are you going to take responsibility if you're done touching me? Bojo knew that if this continued, she would be the one in danger. Fortunately, this wasn't the same as in the car or on the bed. She smiled faintly and stood up. I'm going to get a plate of dried fruits, you guys can continue. Bojo had always been skilled. If she wasn't trapped, it wouldn't be difficult for her to escape from the Almighty's strong aura. The Supreme Alliance members didn't pay attention to this side, they were all immersed in the game of dice rolling. When Lin Feng heard that she was going to get a plate of dried fruits, he glanced up and said, another bucket of ice. All right. Bojo didn't stay any longer, she had wanted to escape for a while. Chi Nemo watched as the figure walked further and further away. He raised his eyebrows and frowned heavily. He had finished the wine in his hand but he couldn't get up. He could only wait for the heat to dissipate. The feeling of that person's fingers still lingered on his long legs. It was too sweet. Chi Mo's eyes darkened. He reached out and tugged his collar open, pressing the loose strands of hair to the back of his head. In this state, he was even more alluring and seductive than usual. Especially when he moved, it was as though he was a blooming red spider lily, elegant with an indescribable beauty, attracting the attention of everyone in the nightclub. Especially the girls, they couldn't help but glance over. But when they thought about the interaction between young Master Qin and the youngster, they could only sigh internally. Why did handsome men end up with other men? Previously, they would still approach him without fear of death, but now that they saw him like this, they really didn't have any thoughts of being extraordinary anymore. Even if that person was exuding a charm that made people want to look at him again and again, they couldn't go any further. It was such a pity that they couldn't touch him. Just as the beauties were feeling disappointed, Bojo had already gotten the dried fruit platter. But when she brushed past a girl, she suddenly stopped. It wasn't for any other reason, it was because the girl didn't know what was going on, but her legs went soft, and she almost fell. Bojo went over to support her instinctively. But when she touched the girl's arm, her heart froze. Why was she so skinny? That was Bojo's first reaction. But before she could react, her fingers were trembling. The girl seemed to be enduring something, her fingers trembling slightly. Bojo thought something was wrong with her, she tilted her head and asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" Washroom. The girl finally raised her head. Her looks were not bad. It was probably because her makeup was messed up that she looked a little like a ghost. Bojo observed her expression. The washroom isn't in this direction. Washroom, I need to go to the washroom. As the girl spoke, she seemed to be inhaling and exhaling. Her expression became very indescribable. Even her face was much paler than before, as if a serious illness was about to act up. But Bojo knew it wasn't a serious illness, it was a state that happened when a drug addict wanted to take drugs. But she never expected someone so young to be involved in drugs on the mainland. After all, the girl seemed to be around her age and was just a high school student. Bojo frowned, reaching out to pull the girl's wrist over, pulling the sleeves of the long dress she was wearing. Sure enough, in the armpit, there were still remnants of the tiny needle and the greenish skin. This proved that she wasn't a newbie. Bojo's eyes widened, this was the first time there was a different color in them. She was well aware of the law and order in the mainland. Some places were extremely strict with drugs, especially in Jiang City. Besides, based on Jiang's personality, even if he opened a nightclub, he wouldn't allow his subordinates to touch such things. After all, he was a military officer. Coupled with his background and his relationship with the Almighty, all of these made this nightclub cleaner than any other nightclub in the city. If there was anything that was not clean, it would be the interactions between the officials. But those had nothing to do with drugs. More importantly, this girl didn't seem like someone who would be addicted to drugs. After all, no matter from the way she dressed, she belonged to the type of obedient girl. Chapter 9:15. Bojo could feel the grip on her wrist getting harder and harder to control. The girl seemed to be enraged, shouting at her darkly, "Wei, where's the washroom? Give it to me, I know it's there, give it to me. Usually, when a drug addict acted up, they would be extremely strong. They would be like a lunatic that no one could control. This girl wasn't an exception. Since she couldn't find the answer she was looking for, she pushed Bojo into a pile of alcohol. It was called a pile of alcohol because there was a triangular shape made of alcohol bottles. It was originally a luxurious display. It was easy to imagine how big of a commotion would be caused by such a collision. Most of the staff in the nightclub looked over. Fortunately, Bojo's reflexes were fast. When the bottle fell, she wasn't pushed down. Otherwise, her right hand would have been cut by the broken bottle. Almost immediately, the nearest nightclub staff ran over. Bojo was stopped by them. Hence, she missed the opportunity to follow the girl. "Sir." The manager wanted to say something, but when he saw the youngster beside Chinamo, his attitude changed instantly. "Young Master Joe, why are you here? Are you hurt anywhere?" Bojo shook her head, her dark eyes watching the direction the girl had left with a glint in her eyes. The nightclub manager didn't know what the youngster was thinking about. He turned to the staff. "Clean up the place and check the surveillance cameras." "What exactly happened?" "Yes." The nightclub manager was smart. He knew the youngster wouldn't knock into a pile of alcohol for no reason. Moreover, she had knocked into it with her back. Bojo knew that Jiang Zhua had hired a good person. She walked over with a devilish smile. "I'm sorry for the trouble, but there is indeed something. Since young Master Jiang is Brother Mo's friend, I'll remind you that someone has other business here. Manager Li, it's time for you to investigate." In a nightclub, the other business was prostitution, pimping, and the most profitable drug. If it was the former, it could be dealt with slowly. But if it was the latter, young Master Jiang's identity was special. If someone found out that there was such a thing in his club, the entire Jiang family would be implicated. Manager Li's expression changed, but he had to suppress it in front of the youngster. "What other business does young Master Joe mean?" Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket and took a step forward. She opened her lips slightly, her voice calm, but it was as though a huge chunk of gold had drilled into Manager Li's heart. "Fan." With just one word, Manager Li could no longer maintain his composure. How did young Master Joe know about this?" Manager Li was very anxious when he said this. Bojo could tell and briefly explained the process. Manager Li really didn't know what to do. Bojo suggested, "Let's head to the surveillance room and check the footage of this girl. We have to report this to the police. If we don't, when they find out, your shop will become a den and you won't be able to clear your name. Also, Manager Li, how many bathrooms do we have here?" "Bathroom?" Manager Li didn't understand. "Young Master Joe, why are you asking this question?" Chapter 9:16. Manager Li wanted to know how she knew the washroom wasn't within their surveillance. Why did he feel as though young Master Joe knew the structure of the nightclub better than him? "We don't have much time, get someone to call the police, we'll talk as we walk." Bojo walked towards the corridor at the side. Manager Li. Who exactly was the manager of this nightclub? Manager Li didn't have any experience in dealing with such matters since it was the Jiang family's business and no one dared to cause trouble here. Now that something like this had happened, it was extremely vexing. Manager Li organized his thoughts. There are many washrooms and some private rooms have their own washrooms. If you include those, there should be more than 100 of them. Public washrooms, Bojo replied faintly. It isn't easy to find a buyer for such transactions in a high-class private room. Manager Li. Since you know so much, I really thought you were the drug dealer, young Master Joe. Public washrooms. Bojo turned to the side, opening up a path. she repeated, indicating for Manager Lee to lead the way. Nightclubs usually didn't have high floors in order to maintain their high-class decorations. The best ones were 2 floors that looked like a palace, standing by the river with bright lights, looking like a place for the upper class. This was the main reason why the Jiang family didn't need to rely on other means to earn money. Such a nightclub wouldn't lack customers and the sales of red wine would be shocking. There were 2 floors and a total of 4 public washrooms. There were 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Every single one of them was very clean. Even some of the toilets were made of ancient wood. There were also some large wine boxes, all of which were placed inside. There was a lemon-scented air freshener in the air. It was very pleasant. Strangely, this was the only public washroom with such a smell. Manager Lee followed the youngster around but couldn't see anything. Until Bojo said, "Let's go to the one we saw just now." Manager Lee opened his mouth. "Young Master Joe, do you think we should wait for the police?" "There isn't a need." Bojo glanced at him. "Trust me, the drugs are in that washroom. The thick lemon-like smell is probably used to deal with sudden police raids. Unless it's a good police dog, it would be hard to detect other smells beneath the lemon-like smell." Manager Lee. "So how did you find out about something that even the police couldn't find out?" Bojo didn't look at Manager Lee's suspicious gaze. She smiled faintly and stepped into the bathroom. Without a moment's hesitation, he directly walked into each of the small partitions. What she saw was basically a seat with a sink in the back. When she lowered her eyes, her silver hair fell down and covered her expression, making her look especially handsome. Perhaps it had something to do with the youngster's movements. He casually stepped on the sink with one of his long legs and knocked on the sink lid with one hand. As his thin lips curled up, he directly lifted the sink lid. The entire process was as manly as flowing water. Manager Lee was dumbfounded by the sight. His disassembly skills were almost on par with professional toilets. Bojo pried them open because she wanted to see if there was anything inside. But it would take too much time for her to do it alone. The young man straightened his back and said, "Manager Lee, get your men to remove all the toilet and sink lids in this washroom. It'll be faster this way." Manager Lee really didn't know how to describe his current feelings. But having someone at the side to handle it was better than having no one since the police hadn't arrived yet. He ordered 4 to 5 people to enter the washroom. Bojo glanced at the corridor outside. "Manager Lee, can I trouble you to hang a cleaning sign outside the washroom? They were here to find clues and arrest someone. If they didn't close the door after creating such a huge commotion, they would be in trouble in the end." Manager Lee sincerely felt that young Master Joe's face didn't change at all when she commanded him. She was even better than their young Master Jiang. At this moment, it wasn't the time to be concerned about such things. Even though he wasn't sure how capable he was. But the youngster didn't seem like a clueless person. But thinking about it, it was strange. It wasn't as if Manager Lee didn't know the youngster in the past. Using the word prodigal to describe him was a compliment. But now, the youngster standing in front of him seemed to have been reborn. His action of kicking open the washroom door was swift. Moreover, when the youngster gave orders, his aura was irresistible. "Go and hang a sign." A smart person like Manager Lee would never judge someone based on their past impressions. Hence, after Bojo finished speaking, he immediately got his men to do it. He wanted to see if the youngster could find anything. The washroom's decor wasn't as luxurious and wasn't as small as other nightclubs. There were about 20 seats. The 4 of them lifted the cover of the sink, but they weren't as fast as the youngster. Manager Lee watched from the side, feeling conflicted. In the end, the youngster lowered his lids. His handsome face seemed to be smiling. He reached out with his other hand and gestured towards him. He didn't even turn his head, indicating for him to go over. As the person in charge of the biggest nightclub in Jiang City, Manager Li, who was known as Boss Li, had never done such a crude thing before. But after understanding the youngster's intentions, he couldn't not go over. There might be something. Helplessly, Manager Li pulled out a handkerchief from the front pocket of his suit. He covered his nose and walked over. Bo Jiao turned and saw Manager Li's expression. Fortunately, she hadn't waited for the police. If they had come, the Almighty would have been the one investigating the case. If the Almighty had come to check the washroom, it would have been torturous given his misophobia. Hence, as the owner, she was too considerate. She had helped her pets solve the problem at the beginning. Manager Li didn't understand why the youngster was smiling. He glanced down and frowned. What is this? A black plastic bag. Bo Jiao arched a brow. Of course it's what we are looking for. Manager Li, aren't you going to take it out? Take it from here. Manager Li's gaze was filled with rejection. Bo Jiao laughed. It's just a sink, it isn't dirty. Why, Manager Li, do you intend to let a customer like me take it? Do you still remember that you are a customer? People who didn't know better would think that this nightclub was owned by your family. You even know the way to the sink. Manager Li screamed in his heart. He wanted to chop his feet. How could he know that the previous time Bo Jiao had been here, she had even climbed through the ceiling? Manager Li had no choice since it wasn't a good thing for others to know. The fewer people who knew about it, the better it would be for their young master Jiang. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes, scooping the bag out of the sink. He wanted to rush out and wash his hands. Bo Jiao smiled faintly as she tore the black plastic bag open. 5 packets of white powdery substance fell out of the bag. Manager Li froze on the spot. It was really drugs. And there was quite a lot of it. How could this be? The people who came here to play had their bags checked. If there was something like this, it would definitely be detained. It was one thing to hear the youngster talk about it, but it was another thing to see it. After all, Manager Li was against drugs. He knew how scary it was. While Manager Li was still lost in his thoughts, Bo Jiao squatted down and picked up one of the packets. She weighed it and caressed it with her fingers. Her eyes dimmed. It's from the Golden Triangle. Manager Li felt that the youngster's reaction wasn't the reaction a high school student should have after seeing drugs. But from the way she was searching, it didn't seem like something a high school student would know. Most importantly, how did young Master Jiao know that these are from the Golden Triangle? If he didn't know young Master Jiao's character, Manager Li would have suspected that he had placed the things in the black plastic bag. But if he thought about it, young Master Jiao probably liked to flaunt his wealth and chase after men. Even now, some images still flashed through his mind. But that didn't include him now. Bo Jiao retracted her hand and straightened her body. This is good stuff, the purity is high, the particles are fine and the workmanship is exquisite. Who would dare to do this here? It must be from overseas. Bo Jiao's last few words were too professional. Manager Li's eyes lit up. He realized that this wasn't an ordinary drug case. Hand the things over to the police and explain the situation in detail. Bo Jiao paused. She glanced over, her eyes glimmering. Oh right, I remember that we have to do a full check before entering. Ordinary things aren't allowed in, right? Manager Li nodded. That was why he was confused. What exactly was going on? Was there a problem with the security? Just as he was thinking about it, the youngster asked again. The young man asked again, who's in charge of cleaning the bathroom? You have to ask the Human Resources Department. As a manager, he didn't know. Bo Jiao smiled. If it's convenient, give me a list. All right. Manager Li's mind wasn't on this anymore. When his phone lit up, he seemed to have regained his confidence. The police are here, I'll get them over now. Don't. Bojo reached out to stop him, a faint smile on her face. Let them go to your office. Some things aren't suitable to cause such a huge commotion. If we alert the enemy, we won't even be able to have a surprise. Surprise. Now, Manager Lee only felt terrified. Who on earth placed these things in the sink of the toilet bowl without anyone noticing? And it wasn't just one, there were 2 black plastic bags. That was a total of 10 packets. 10 packets. How many people would be addicted? The scariest thing was, he didn't know how many people had bought a portion of it before they discovered it. Manager Lee rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Why was Jiang City so unstable during this period of time? What should we do, young Master Zhou? We have to tell the police about this sooner or later. Bojo's eyes dimmed. We can tell them, but don't let them come to this toilet. Just treat it as a routine check. I'll inform Brother Mo later and he'll settle the rest. It would be best if young Master Qin could help us. Manager Lee heaved a sigh of relief. I still have to inform Boss Jiang about this. We can't hide such a huge problem from him. Bojo wouldn't interfere. Up to you, it's better if others don't know. I understand, young Master Zhou. It won't be a good influence. Bojo knew that it wasn't just a bad influence, there was a high possibility that someone had planted them here. The drug business was a profitable business. Many people were unscrupulous in order to earn this kind of money. Sometimes, the people who dealt with these things in the middle were the most inconspicuous ordinary people. They wouldn't even think about what was in the black plastic bags. In the past, Bojo had been to a small town near the Golden Triangle in Yun City. There were many anti-narcotics policemen from the past. Countless anti-narcotics policemen died there in a year. They knew that it was the entrance to China. Once it was opened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hence, they didn't hesitate to risk their lives. It was all for the sake of allowing the people living here to be happy and live a blessed life. It was a pity that some people didn't have this awareness. Especially in that kind of border area. No one could have imagined that the largest drug trading market at that time, and the way to transport drugs from overseas to within the country, was a vegetable market in that small town. On one side, they were honest vegetable sellers. On the other, they were transporters who transported drugs to various parts of the continent. They knew what they were doing. But in their hearts, it was fine as long as they didn't take the drugs. It was mainly because selling drugs was more profitable than doing anything else. Hence, these vegetable sellers became the perfect middleman for the drug traffickers. At that time, the police couldn't find any clues because no one would have thought that the ordinary vegetable seller was a drug transporter. What was more frightening was that the entire market was the same. Once a person's worldview was formed, it was really hard to change. We humans are often the ones who kill ourselves. The people in the market were like this. When the police went to investigate, they even felt that the police were interfering with their business. It wasn't like the narcotics officers had never encountered such a situation before. There were also some celebrities who took drugs. There would always be a group of people who would say, "Isn't it just taking drugs? We didn't harm anyone. Why are you pestering our dada? I really feel wronged for our dada, if this was enough to make him feel aggrieved. What about the anti-narcotics police who sacrificed their lives at the border to protect everyone?" Bojo felt that some people weren't worth protecting. So she was different from the Almighty. Chapter 9:17. Even though they were doing the right thing, they weren't understood. On the other hand, the wrongdoers were easily forgiven. That was human nature. Bojo had always known this. Because some people would easily forgive someone for someone else. The reason was simple, they weren't the ones who suffered the most. Perhaps that was the most heart-chilling part. The person they were protecting was the source of everything. Bo Jiao stood up. Without another word, she headed in the direction she had come from. After Manager Li kept the drugs, the first thing he did was to call Jiang Zhua. Jiang Zhua's car hadn't reached home yet. After hearing the entire story, his eyes dimmed. Turn around and head back to Yisei. Yes, young master. The driver didn't understand what had happened, but his young master's expression was worse than before. He started to feel uneasy. Jiang Zhua instructed Manager Li from afar. Is young Master Qin still in the shop? Yes, Manager Li replied immediately. Boss Jiang, don't worry, young Master Jiao has already informed young Master Qin. Jiang Zhua frowned. Young Master Zhou. That's right, we have to thank young Master Zhou. I never expected him to be so knowledgeable. If he hadn't noticed the abnormality of the person who bumped into him, we wouldn't have realized that there was such a business in the shop. What's more unbelievable is that he managed to find the drugs from the washroom in just 5 minutes. Young Master Jiang, you can't judge a person based on their past. They change too quickly, way too quickly. Manager Li wanted Jiang Zhua to understand the entire situation. Mainly, he wanted to explain why young Master Zhou knew about the drugs. It was because young Master Zhou had been the one who had discovered the drugs and not him. Oh right, young Master Zhou was the one who suggested calling the police. He said it would be good for our shop. Jiang Zhua's fingers stilled. He hadn't expected that the person who would solve the problem for his shop would be the young master of the Fu family. The night continued to fall. Qin Mo glanced down at the time on his phone. Wasn't a certain someone taking too long to get a dried fruit plate? At this thought, Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Then he stood up, the warmth in his eyes no longer visible. Captain, where are you going? Lin Feng was obviously a little drunk. Qin Mo glanced at his blushing face before turning to look at Yun Hu, who was still pouring wine for Lin Feng. He understood what was going on and replied calmly, washroom. Why are all of you going to the bathroom? Lin Feng lowered his head and downed another glass of wine. Qin Mo basically didn't interfere with the relationships between team members, be it male or female. What he was thinking was, what did that guy go to do? With a certain someone's skills, even if something had happened, it wouldn't have taken so long. A whole 15 minutes. Could it be that it was the same as last time? He was on the run again. Qin Mo's left hand that was hanging by his side tightened. The curve of his chin was a little cold, so much so that there was an indescribable hostility in his back view. There were always all kinds of people in a nightclub, especially in the direction of the corridor. There was also a boy who seemed to be drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to walk in front of Qin Mo. That person probably didn't have a normal sexual orientation. When he saw Qin Mo walking over, he couldn't move his eyes away. It was as though he wanted to get closer to Qin Mo. After all, men were usually more open than women. His intention to ask Qin Mo to sleep was obvious. But the youngster just lowered his voice and called out, handsome. Qin Mo opened his thin lips and said, scram. He respected everyone's sexual orientation. But it didn't mean that he respected the debauchery of this circle. He was instinctively disgusted by such shameless people. It was Qin Mo's fault for looking like a man and a woman. The boy didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and teased even more. If you don't try, how do you know you won't like it? Qin Mo swept his gaze over. The boy thought that he had a chance. His hand was about to touch Qin Mo's chest. In the next second, he was kicked to the ground. Qin Mo didn't hold back in this kick. The boy held his knee and rolled back and forth in pain. Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping. When he looked up and saw the youngster who appeared at the corner, he stopped in his tracks. Both of them had never expected to meet in the middle of the corridor. Bojiu watched the scene. She was almost certain that the Almighty was born straight. But why was he so insistent on making him straight? But the original owner of this body must have pursued the Almighty in the same way. It was a miracle that he was able to live healthily until now. Qin Emo stuffed a hand into his pocket and walked towards her under the boy's gaze. The boy bit his lips. So you aren't a straight man. You already have a partner. Why are you acting so serious? Hey, ask your friend if he is willing to do it as a threesome. I don't have any objections. Bojiu found his words hilarious. Where did he get his confidence from? He thought that if he didn't have any objections, others would agree to his ridiculous suggestion. As expected, no matter where you were, there would always be people with a broken worldview. Bojiu and Qin Emo had the same attitude towards such people. They would either ignore them or beat them up. It was obvious that they had more important matters to attend to today. Hence, Bojiu didn't even glance at the boy. She turned to Qin Emo. Brother Emo, there's a problem with darkness. Qin Emo saw the seriousness in the youngster's eyes and immediately realized it was a huge problem. Let's talk while we walk. Alright, but this isn't the direction. We have to go to Manager Li's office. Bojiu took a step forward. Qin Emo was on her left, and the two of them disappeared around the corner. The boy on the ground felt as though he had been slapped in the face. It was a harsh slap. Time trickled by slowly. After they met up, Bojiu told Qin Emo everything that had happened. After she was done, she couldn't help but ask, "Did you want to beat me up when I chased you like this in the past?" Unexpectedly, Qin Emo thought about it seriously. You should be glad that you haven't been as close to me as he is now. Which meant, it was within your tolerance range. No. Qin Emo was thinking about his attitude back then. But I didn't want to bother. Bojiu arched a brow. That's not much better. Indeed, I didn't like you at the start. Qin Emo glanced at her. Until you changed your method to attract my attention. You refused to add me as a friend in the game. It wasn't a bad method to advance by taking a step back. Bojiu opened her mouth. She wanted to say that the Almighty had misunderstood. At that time, she had been purely rejecting him. But before she could speak, Qin Emo spoke again, his gaze deep. Qin Emo opened his mouth again, his gaze deep. Or did I misunderstand? Did you want to reject me from the start? That's weird. You were insisting on wanting me the day before and the next day, you didn't even seem to recognize me. Do you think that's normal? It wasn't normal. Hence, Bojiu could only swallow her words. She admitted his words. I was indeed taking a step back to advance. Qin Emo chuckled at the youngster's depressed expression. Do you like me that much? Do you like me so much that you would resort to such underhanded methods? Yes. What else could she do? Say no. Then the Almighty would notice something amiss and discover her biggest secret? She was starting to suspect that the Almighty had said it on purpose. Since you like me so much, Qin Emo paused, looking at the youngster. Why didn't you agree to be with me? Bojiu paused. Every single one of his questions was a trap. The Almighty was the only one who could do such a thing. Bojiu had to find an excuse. I'm still a boy, I have to be careful. Qin Emo watched the youngster, his gaze deepening. Then I'll wait for you to regain your true identity. Bojiu didn't know how to respond. She hoped that the Almighty would treat her the same way he treated her after he found out who she was. On the other end, Manager Li couldn't help greeting Qin Emo when he saw him. Young Master Qin. The police had arrived as well. After finding out about the drugs, they had planned to take action immediately. Fortunately, Qin Emo had arrived in time. He had called Director Huang since most people didn't know Qin Mo's identity. Without Director Huang's call, the police wouldn't have been mobilized. Director Huang knew Qin Mo well. If there wasn't a case, he wouldn't have contacted him. Unless there was a case. Hence, the moment he hung up, Director Huang rushed over. By then, Qin Mo and the others were already in the surveillance room. With the youngster as a witness, they had successfully locked onto the drug addict who had bumped into him. I have to report this case to the higher-ups and apply for a higher level of authority. Director Huang's voice was deep. Since the drugs were being spread in such a manner, it wasn't just a simple business. It was a large-scale organized drug trafficking. They had even processed the smell, which proved that their opponent wasn't easy to deal with. In the end, how did the drugs get in? How did they contact the buyer? Who was the one who avoided the surveillance at night and hid the drugs in the bathroom? Besides, it was rare to see such a drug trafficking method. There had to be something fishy going on. Director Huang hadn't experienced such a thing in years. Ever since Qin Mo had dealt with that bunch of people, drugs hadn't appeared in Jiang City again. Why did he sense a dangerous aura that signaled the arrival of a storm? Qin Mo was still watching the surveillance when he caught sight of the youngster lifting the lid of the sink. He glanced over, glancing at her. How did a rich young master know that it was easy to hide drugs in such a place? Bojiu seemed to have noticed his gaze. She tilted her head and caught a flash of suspicion in his eyes. At the same time, she realized that her actions weren't appropriate in front of the camera. It could even be said that her actions were filled with loopholes. But even so, Bojiu was still able to pull it off. She lifted her thin lips and her eyes curved into crescent moons. When the girl bumped into me just now, she kept talking about the washroom. I found it strange, but fortunately, we went to the washroom to take a look. Manager Lee. That wasn't a look, it was a walk in the park. She was even more familiar with such matters than the police. But there wasn't a need to say such things in such a setting. Bojiu glanced up at Qin Mo. She wasn't sure if the Almighty would believe her. Even if he didn't, there was nothing she could do. The more she interacted, the harder it was to hide. Bojiu was mentally prepared for this. What should we do now? Manager Lee asked. Qin Mo retracted his arm from the control panel, his voice calm. Put the things you found back in their original positions and pretend you don't know anything. Manager Lee was confused. What was young Master Qin going to do? Leave a few plainclothes policemen to patrol the toilet 24/7. Within a day, arrest all the people who take the goods from here. Qin Mo tapped his fingers and asked the same question. How many cleaners are in charge of the bathroom? After hearing this, Manager Lee subconsciously turned to the youngster. At this moment, Bojiu understood the Almighty's entire plan. They would continue to place the bait. Not only would they not alert the enemy, but they would also think that it was safe and walk right into the trap. As for why they were asking about the cleaners in the bathroom, the reason was simple. Other than the staff of the nightclub, everyone had to go through a security check before entering the nightclub. Hence, they could basically confirm that someone from the inside had brought the drugs in. In terms of quantity, carrying so many drugs to work would be a psychological burden for anyone. No one would be afraid of being discovered when doing such a thing. If they were discovered, it would be a crime. Hence, they wouldn't do it. There was only one type of person who could easily bring such a large amount of drugs into the bathroom, and that was the bathroom cleaner. Usually, the cleaners of large entertainment venues would push a trolley with a medium-sized trash can to do the first thing in the morning. It was a natural tool for transporting drugs. No one would notice what was inside. Besides, only the cleaners wouldn't be noticed when they were cleaning the bathroom. Besides, they would be able to check if there was anything wrong with the goods during their shifts. This meant that the person transporting the drugs was definitely one of the cleaners. Bojo wasn't sure how the girl knew the drugs were in the bathroom. She must have seen it while following the drug trafficker. Chapter 9:18. Manager Lee didn't understand why both of them were asking about the cleaners, but since young Master Chin wanted to know, it wasn't a small matter. A phone call immediately summoned the personnel of the Human Resource Department. Young Master Chin, this is the information on the employees in charge of cleaning at Yisei. There are a total of 12 people, and they all work in 2 shifts. These people aren't very educated, and they aren't very young. There are aunties and uncles, and they're basically all from the counties around Jiang City. If young Master Chin wants to look for them, I'll call all of them over now, Manager Lee said and was about to call them. There's no need. Chin Mo lowered his head and flipped through the document, his long fingers sliding across the surface. His side profile was elegant and handsome. Do you know where they are staying? Manager Lee glanced at the HR department behind him. The person replied immediately, Yisei has their own dormitory. Usually, the foreign employees who don't have a place to stay would stay in the dormitory. So all 10 of them are staying in the dormitory. Chin Mo's voice was calm. The person hesitated for a moment. I think so. I think so. Chin Mo lifted his lids and glanced at the person. The person shuddered. When they came, they registered to stay in the dormitory, but I haven't done the report for this year's occupancy. Hence, I'm not sure if they are still staying in the staff dormitory like before. As soon as Manager Lee heard this, he knew that this employee had made a mistake in his work. He narrowed his eyes. Go and ask them where they are living now. Yes. The person could tell from Manager Lee's tone that he wasn't happy. At this moment, the silver-haired youngster who was resting on the counter jumped down and blocked his way. It's fine if you ask, it would make people wary. Since you are in charge of the HR department, it shouldn't be a problem to arrange for a new cleaner to enter the company. A new cleaner? Who? The person was confused. He turned towards Manager Lee. Manager Lee was confused too. Bojo smiled, lifting her chin with a devilish smile. Me, the Supreme Alliance's face. Manager Lee was about to retort young Master Joe for joking at a time like this. Just then, he heard a cold and indifferent voice. What is the Supreme Alliance's face going to do? Manager Lee turned around abruptly and looked at Chin Mo. No way, was young Master Chin serious. I'm going to dress up as a high school student who dropped out of school to play games. Now that I'm in a foreign land, I'm going to find a job. Bojo smiled happily. Brother Mo, what do you think? Chin Mo glanced at her, his voice faint. One day, you can't really stay. Report tomorrow morning and leave at night. All right. Bojo placed one hand into her pocket, her lips still curved upwards. There was something hidden in the corner of her eyes. But Chin Mo's next sentence was the main point. Manager Lee, prepare 2 sets of clothes for the cleaners here. I will be joining this guy at the same time. Bojo, if Manager Lee had only been shocked before, then he was completely shaken now. His throat moved back and forth. Young Master Chin, did I misunderstand your meaning? Asking the young master of the Chin family, who was extremely powerful in Jiang City, to be a cleaner in their house. This was simply asking for his life. Bojo didn't think it was reliable either. She leaned over and whispered, Brother Mo, aren't you a neat freak? How did you disguise yourself as a cleaner? I still have you. Chin Mo glanced at the clean and exquisite face in front of him, resisting the urge to pinch it. His pleasant voice was as usual. You can do the cleaning when the time comes. Bojo. She was only convinced by the Almighty for someone who could say such shameless words so calmly. Manager Lee couldn't hear their conversation. He stood at the side, his gaze drifting. He had heard that young Master Qin treated the youngster differently, but he hadn't dared to think that way. After all, the Qin family's teachings wouldn't allow such things to happen. Even though young Master Jiao had changed a lot, he was still a boy. Before this, Manager Li hadn't expected the rumors to be true. After all, young Master Qin had never allowed anyone to whisper in his ear. "I'll get someone to prepare it now." Manager Li was a smart man. He knew when to speak up. Qin Mo nodded and didn't say anything else. By now, Manager Li also understood that it was best to follow the procedure and try not to alert the enemy. The bathroom was restored to its original state. According to Qin Mo's instructions, there were plainclothes policemen patrolling the area. Especially when the cleaners went in, they had to follow them. Actually, it was easy to find out who had planted the drugs in the bathroom. But the important thing wasn't the person who planted the drugs but the person who gave them the drugs. Hence, they couldn't act rashly. They couldn't arrest the culprit immediately. They would use the bait to find more clues. That was Qin Mo's and Bo Jiao's goal. Once again, the two of them had the same thought. The disguise was necessary. Actually, Qin Mo didn't have to do it personally. But it was obvious that someone hadn't learned his lesson. The night continued. No one knew what had happened in the bathroom. But the crowd had seen the police coming. If they left quietly, it would be suspicious. Hence, they walked into the main hall as though it was a routine inspection. Even though it was a routine inspection, the crowd was still a little restrained when they were having fun. After the police left, all of them released their natural instincts. Nightclubs were meant for people to drink and get drunk for the day. The dimmer the lighting, the more likely it was to be licentious. The boy from before had hooked up with an uncle. The uncle had a family and had a child. But that didn't stop him from asking him out. Moreover, he should have taken a liking to him. The boy glanced at the room card in his hand. His body slumped against the uncle's body. Society isn't fair to groups like us. I can understand how you feel. You definitely don't want to go home and see your wife's face. Regardless of whether it was a female or male mistress, they would always say the same thing. I don't have any feelings for her. Don't think that I have everything. Actually, I'm not happy at all. Does she know who you are? Of course not. I can't tell her. I can only relax outside like this. Sigh, I understand. The boy placed his hand on the uncle's chest. There was a deep meaning in his voice. I will accompany you today. The man grabbed his hand. He looked as though he wanted to go to the room immediately. When Bo Jiao and Qin Mo passed by, they saw such a scene. The boy still felt that he was rather noble. He lifted his chin and followed the man anxiously. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo weren't people who liked to express their opinions. But they still felt disgusted when they met such a man and a male mistress. This had nothing to do with sexual orientation. If you liked a man, don't get married. Since you are married and can have children, live a good life. If you don't want to, get divorced. He was such a scumbag. He had ruined a woman's life and yet he said that he was wronged. Did he even have any shame? But it was probably because there were too many animations and novels that beautified the relationship between men. That was why some people felt that true love was only between men. Even some men who were married used such ridiculous words as an excuse. Love didn't discriminate between genders. But betraying his wife and child. Regardless of whether he liked a man or a woman, he was a scumbag. Needless to say, the boy was debauched to a certain extent. This was the situation in the circle that was closer to reality. This was also why even though Yun who was in the circle, he didn't let Lin Feng come into contact with such things. He was worried that the guy would think that he liked him because he needed to solve something. He liked a certain guy because he had liked him since he was young. He liked Lin Feng as a person. After that, it was gender. Hence, when Bo Jiu returned, she asked Yunhu a question in a low voice. Yunhu glanced over and said, "I won't get married. Even if a woman is willing to be with me, I don't want to harm her. If the name on the marriage certificate isn't that guy's name, it's useless to me." The more Bo Jiu listened, the more she felt that her naive and sweet senior would be defeated by such a deep love. But Lin Feng probably didn't notice it at all. When Bo Jiu and the others returned, she was whispering to Yunhu. She leaned over and pulled the youngster over. She was still holding a wine bottle in her hand. Then she grabbed her hair, looking extremely troubled. "There's something. Analyze it for me." "It's about who?" Bo Jiu loved to analyze. "What is it?" "Actually, it isn't whose problem." Lin Feng had indeed drunk too much. He lowered his head and swayed. "I don't know what's wrong with my mother. Recently, she has been asking me not to touch who. Don't you think it's weird?" When Bo Jiu heard this, she roughly understood what he meant. She laughed so hard that her shoulders shook. Mother Lin was too adorable. Only a biological mother would do something like that. "Little Spade, why do you keep laughing? Analyze it for me." Lin Feng swayed again. Bo Jiu reached out and patted his shoulder. "Senior, good luck. After all, even your biological mother thinks that you are the one trying to turn almighty Yun gay and not the other way around." Of course, Bo Jiu wouldn't say the last sentence. Good luck. What did he have to good luck for? Lin Feng's brain seemed to be stuffed with a lot of paste. Lin Feng's alcohol tolerance was surprisingly good. Other than the fact that he wanted to understand something, he couldn't think straight. Everything else was surprisingly quiet. After a short while, he fell asleep on the sofa hugging the wine bottle. Indeed, it was time to disperse. Bo Jiu wanted to send Yao Yao back, but she sensed that Yao Yao had her own matters to attend to. She didn't need to send her back since someone was waiting for her. Uncle Ian and the others called for a cab. Only Bo Jiu, Qin Mo, and Yunhu were left. Bo Jiu watched as Lin Feng slept soundly on Yunhu's back. He was so drunk that he couldn't resist at all. It seemed like Senior Lin wasn't aware of what he was guarding against. Yunhu knew how painful it was to be woken up in the middle of sleep. Moreover, it was already very cold outside, so he decided to book a private room in the night. "I'll stay here with him for the night." "All right, Brother Mo and I will be leaving first." Bo Jiu lifted her lips. She could tell that Almighty Yun had played a part in Senior Lin's drunkenness. Just as they left, Yunhu turned his head. Yunhu, who was carrying Yunhu, turned his head. That position made it easy for him to kiss him. His thin lips brushed past the corner of Lin Feng's mouth. At first, he thought everything was over. Who knew that he wasn't awake yet? His gaze wasn't fixed. His dazed expression challenged Yunhu's patience. "Where are we going?" "A competition. I haven't mastered my tower stealing skills." He was obviously still drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to participate in a competition at this time. Lin Feng was really drunk. He was quieter. Even when Yunhu said, "Go to sleep," he didn't stand on end like he usually did. Instead, he looked at Yunhu cautiously. Instead, he nodded. It's time to sleep after drinking too much. It wasn't easy for Lin Feng to remember this. Yunhu was clear about it. When Lin Feng was drunk, he wasn't as wary of him as he usually was. Hence, they could sleep together after a competition like before. Ever since this fellow knew his intentions, he didn't seem to avoid him on the surface, but in reality, he had restrained some of his intimate actions. Only when his thoughts were not so clear could he be so close to him like he was now. However, there was one thing that made Yunhu's gaze tremble after he closed the door to the private room. It was because he was taking off his clothes. It's so hot, where exactly is this? Why isn't there any air conditioning? Lin Feng said as he tore his collar, revealing a large patch of jade-like skin. Because of the alcohol, there was a faint pinkish tint to it. Forget it, I'm going to take a shower. Yes, a shower. It stinks, it's too smelly. Drunkards were not only defenseless. Similarly, they would release their natural instincts to a certain extent. As Lin Feng spoke, he lowered his head to undo his belt. Yunhu watched this scene. His feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. He had to clench his fists to suppress his urge. However, the drunk Lin Feng didn't notice it at all. He couldn't undo his pants. Seeing that his good brother was there, he walked over. His body was still swaying and his words were still stuttering. Help me, undo it. Why is it getting tighter the more I undo it? As Lin Feng spoke, he pulled Yunhu's hand over and placed it on his pants in a manly manner. He finally lifted his face. His white shirt was half unbuttoned, his skin as fair as jade and snow, matching his current requirements. Chapter 9:19. The night outside was getting darker and darker. In the military courtyard, at the Qin family's house. Movie Queenan, who had just landed, was sipping on her tea. She had booked a plane ticket so suddenly. Her tiredness only added to her charm. Which means Jiao has been sleeping at home for the past few days. Movie Queenan placed her teacup down and glanced at Madame Zhang. There were some things that Madame Zhang couldn't say. But Movie Queen Anne's heart skipped a beat because of her expression. I never expected them to have such feelings for each other. Madame Zhang didn't know what to say. After all, it wasn't easy to accept a man liking another man. Madame Zhang was just about to speak. Movie Queen Anne inhaled deeply and interrupted her. Let me think about it. Indeed, she had to think about it. She only had one son. There were people with similar sexual orientations in the entertainment industry. Movie Queen Anne had friends who were like that. But when such a thing happened to her son, she couldn't make a decision so quickly. But thinking about it carefully, she had never worried about her son since he was young. But as a mother, in order to pursue her career, she didn't take good care of the family. As a result, the child was born with a low need for relationships. When he was 5 or 6 years old, he would remind her to take care of herself because of her abnormal routine. It was hard for an ordinary child to mature so early. No matter what decision they made, her son wouldn't cry or make a fuss. Even then, he was sent to Los Angeles under his father's care. He didn't say anything. He had always been outstanding. In today's terms, it was a miracle that he didn't go astray. He was outstanding to the point that when that happened, it was then that Movie Queen Anne realized how much she owed her child all these years. Her son was indifferent and didn't care much about relationships. But once he cared, he wouldn't let go. Even she couldn't predict the consequences. What happened back then couldn't happen a second time. But she couldn't accept it immediately. For a moment, she wanted to blame the boy. But the thought of him being Joe, she couldn't blame him. Every time she saw the youngster, she wanted to raise him as her second son. How could she bear to blame him? Wasn't it good to be brothers? Why did the plot go astray? The more Movie Queen Anne thought about it, the more worried she became. But she also understood that Joe was probably not the one who took the initiative in this matter. She knew her son all too well. He could bend others, but if others tried to bend him, they would most likely be crippled. Or did her son have feelings for Joe that were different from other people from the beginning? movie queen and was indeed a smart person. She wasn't just smart. In her position, she was more magnanimous than others and considered things from a comprehensive perspective. What's more, she knew her son. I still want to carry a grandson. Movie queen and looked at Madame Zhang, acting coquettishly like a daughter. Auntie Zhang understood. She also wanted to see young master have a young master one day. Movie queen and retracted her gaze. Instead of talking to Madame Zhang, she was persuading herself. But this is his life after all. What he wants is the most important. But will he be able to lead a good life in the future? You also know that Qin Mo doesn't seem to be in love, but once he is, his entire being will sink into it. Aunt Zhang was not in a position to give an answer. She knew that someone as wise as Madame did not need an answer from her. But if it's Joe, it's still acceptable. Movie queen inside. I never expected that one day, my almighty would become my daughter-in-law. I really can't accept it. Madame Zhang. Madam, if boss heard what you said, it wouldn't be good, you know. That's good too. Movie queen and was serious. No one else has such a handsome daughter-in-law who can play games so well. In the future, I can poach Joe from Supreme Alliance and bring him into the entertainment industry to film a movie with me. By then, Mo wouldn't be able to stop me even if he wanted to since I'm his mother-in-law. Wait a minute, Joe should be my daughter-in-law and not my son-in-law, right? Madame Zhang replied, this should be. Even though she didn't know much about the relationship between boys, with young master's personality, he wouldn't give himself to anyone, right? After movie queen and thought it through, she reverted to her usual temperament. She leaned against the sofa lazily, still wearing a long white dress with a pure red cloak. Her figure was perfect, her wide sleeves caressed her face, accentuating her beauty. She smiled excitedly. I'll ask Mo some other day, if he's the one below, that would be amazing. This was indeed Madame's idea. Madame Zhang couldn't help thinking while being impressed. Perhaps this was the difference between the Qin family and the Qin family. Only a family like the Qin family could raise someone like the Almighty. It wasn't without reason. It wasn't just money and power, it was also his way of thinking and values. Hence, there was only one Qin Mo in the entire world. That night, Qin Mo didn't return home. If he had returned, he might have been able to hear Movie Queenin and Madame Zhang's conversation. Movie Queenin thought that since the two kids had developed a certain level of relationship, she should visit Joe's mother. Should she pay Joe's mother a visit too? Movie Queenin had always been a person of action. But the moment she stood up, she suddenly thought of something. She had agreed to the relationship between the two kids. But what about Joe's family? Movie Queenin decided to test the waters. As for how she would do it, she had to think carefully. Since her son was already gay, she would rather find someone she didn't like. Joe was still more likable. Movie Queenin had many friends, but she had never interacted with the Fu family. She didn't even know Joe's mother's name. It seemed like she had to find someone to find out more about it and get closer to her. Movie Queen's eyes lit up. Suddenly, she thought of something and called a friend. Her friend specialized in plastic surgery and women's clubs. She was famous for being rich and well-connected in the socialite circle in Jiang City. But when she saw Movie Queen's call, she became as happy as a child. Sisterin, why are you so free to contact me? Have you finished filming? I'm taking a few days off. Movie Queenin smiled faintly. Isn't there a gathering at your place? It seems like all the ladies in Jiang City will be there. I want to join in the fun. Hearing that, the man felt as if he had won the lottery. Mizzen, are you serious? You're coming. Of course. Movie Queenin retorted. When have I ever lied? No, I just can't believe it. Mizzen is coming. I have to ask someone to prepare the best red wine. The man was so happy that even the people around him were curious about what had happened. Who was Mizzen? After she hung up the phone, a few rich ladies asked, "Who is she?" A few of the rich ladies asked, "Who is this?" Even our female CEO treats him with respect. She chuckled lightly and waved to her female friends. The group of women leaned over and heard her say a name. Everyone's expression changed. "Gosh, how do you know her?" "I have some connections with my father." "Is she really as pretty as she looks in the movies?" "You just called her sister, but why does she look younger than you?" "Pfft, she's prettier in person." "But I heard that celebrities usually have people behind them." Could it be that she's one of them? Her gaze dimmed. "She isn't. It's fine if you think about others in the past, but don't think about sisterin. Be careful or you'll get yourself into trouble." "It's my fault, it's my fault. I was just asking, don't be angry. Since the movie queen is coming, shouldn't we change the guest list? Don't invite those small businesses, like the one from the fried bun shop and the one from the countryside with the surname He. People like them will lower their standards." She was a businessman. Even though she wasn't the best, she had basic etiquette. "I've already sent out the invitations, but the guest list won't be changed. Also, don't say such things in front of Sisterin, she doesn't like it." "Are you serious? How can a celebrity be so ignorant?" "She isn't ignorant, you'll understand when you meet her. She doesn't need to look at her family background like you and me." "Juan, what are you saying?" "I'm being too. I was talking about you and me, I'm included. After all, she was the CEO. It's for your own good, there will be too many people at the gathering. Besides, He Honghua's son has been doing well recently, even my daughter is asking for his autograph." You should change your mindset. I know you used to be close to Su Mei and didn't like He Honghua, but it's different now. She hasn't done anything bad to you, so it's good for you to give her a way out. He's just a gamer, how good can he be? Can he be compared to my son? No matter what, he has entered the industry and is a celebrity. Juan, can I bring my son to meet movie queenin? Sure, but Guorong, don't be too obvious, it's just a gathering tomorrow. Don't worry. Even though he said so, Yang Huan was still worried. With Guorong's attitude, it was hard to believe that she wouldn't do anything. But the gathering couldn't be rescheduled. It wasn't easy for Sisterin to come, so she couldn't let her leave in disappointment. On the other side, after movie queenin hung up, she started to admire her intelligence. Using this method, it wouldn't be too abrupt to bump into Mrs. He at the party without anyone noticing. She had to buy a gift. Forget it, she couldn't buy a ready-made one, it wasn't sincere. Oh right, I have a bracelet that doesn't care about skin color, Madam He will definitely like it. Madame Zhang watched silently as her madam prepared for tomorrow's meeting, preparing the gift and trying on the gown. It was an indescribable feeling. Was she already going through this process so soon? Madam hadn't agreed at the start. Actually, movie queenin had thought it through because she didn't want to see her son continue living like before. The youngster's appearance had changed a lot. That was the first time she had seen her son care about someone. That was enough, she didn't care about the gender. Outside the window, the trees swayed like a painting. The Fu family's villa wasn't guarded like the Qin family's. Chen Xiaodong hugged the blanket, asking his young master once more, "Young Master Qin, are you really going to stay here?" Bo Jiu couldn't do anything about it. After leaving the nightclub, the Almighty had given her two choices, he could either sleep at his place or hers. Bo Jiu had analyzed the situation and decided it was safer to sleep at her place. That way, she could use the excuse that her bed was a single bed and let the Almighty sleep in the guest bedroom. This time, he had indeed miscalculated. He Honghua was the happiest, she had prepared a pile of supper. He Honghua was still the same. Even though she came from the countryside, she was still magnanimous and candid. Her family had always been like this, they didn't eat any delicacies but the food they made had to be Jio's favorite. Chi Nemo didn't come for nothing, a casual question had allowed him to learn a lot about her childhood. But Jio is different now. In the past, he wouldn't be able to take anything bitter. Now, he likes to drink coffee and even bought a piano. I wonder how much he has learned behind my back. All mothers love to praise their children. He Honghua was no exception, the moment she mentioned Jio, her round face would be filled with smiles. Qin Mo's hand paused. Even if it was a second personality, his taste buds wouldn't change. What exactly was wrong with her? The conversation between the two did not continue. Firstly, it was too late. Secondly, Bojio had come down and interrupted their conversation. She had overheard their conversation when she had walked over. If she continued, the Almighty would only be suspicious of her. The room is ready, Brother Mo should rest early. Bojio arched a brow. Coincidentally, Qin Mo wanted someone to check on something, so he replied faintly, all right. Bojio smiled at the unexpected success. As expected, her house was relatively safer. After Qin Mo left, Bojio started discussing serious matters with Yi Honghua. Bojio started to talk business with Yi Honghua. Mom, do you have the school's contact details? If you do, can you help me contact our year's director? Year's director. Yi Honghua thought that something had happened. Is it because you've been focusing on the competition recently that the school isn't happy about it? Bojio smiled faintly. Mom, it's not that, I'm looking for accommodation. Accommodation? Yi Honghua's voice rose sharply. Bojio immediately reached out and covered her lips, afraid that the person in the guest room upstairs would hear them. Bojio pressed her fingers against her lips and made a shushing gesture. She lowered her handsome face and said, Mom, I'll only stay for 2 weeks. If I'm not used to it, I'll come back. The first half of her sentence was true, but the second half. In 2 weeks, both the National League and Fu Zhongyi would end. Chapter 920. The dorms are all guys, how are you going to stay there? Yi Honghua was worried. Why did you suddenly decide to stay in school? You've been staying at home for so many years. Don't worry, I won't be discovered. The beds are bunk beds, I'll get a top bunk. Bojio hugged Yi Honghua's soft shoulders. I'm in my 2nd year of high school, staying in school will give me more time to study. Besides, it's a crucial period for the Fu Corporation so I won't stay at home. That way, you won't have to cook for me. You've gotten skinnier from the competition and now that you're resting for 2 days, you have to eat at home. Yi Honghua was adamant about this. Bojio smiled. I'll come back during the holidays, once a week. In reality, she would still come back. It would be easier for her to investigate in school and hide her identity. But in the Fu family, there was a temporary disguise room she had created which would make it easier for her to do many things. But she wouldn't tell Yi Honghua about it. She didn't set up the internet terminal at the Fu family's house because she was worried that someone would target Yi Honghua if anything went wrong. Firstly, she wasn't sure who the crime squad was and secondly, the person who impersonated her hadn't been caught. She couldn't risk Yi Honghua. In the past, she had no worries because she was alone. Now, she had something she wanted to protect, be it Supreme Alliance or this mother in front of her. The more Yi Honghua looked at her Joe, the more handsome she became. She hadn't realized it in the past but now that she had her own plans for every decision, she felt both comforted and melancholic. Are you free these 2 days? Will you be at home? Mom has a gathering I want to bring you to tomorrow. Tomorrow. Bojo hesitated. Honghua immediately asked, "Are you busy?" "It's fine. I do have something tomorrow, but when is the gathering?" "I'll try to finish it as soon as possible." Bojo always doted on Honghua. The middle-aged Honghua enjoyed this. "Tomorrow night, it's a gathering organized by a friend. They are all from all walks of life in Jiang City. I just took over some of the Fu family's decisions and it wouldn't be appropriate if I didn't go. You know a lot while Mom doesn't know anything. I'll feel more at ease with you around." "All right." Bojo glanced at the time. "Where is it?" "I should be able to finish my work by 7 o'clock. Then, I can go in with Mom to get some food and drinks." Who wouldn't like having such a child by their side? Honghua's chubby face beamed with joy. "You must like that place too. Didn't you always want me to bring you to these upper-class gatherings? Now we finally have a chance." Bojo replied. She didn't deny what had happened in the past. The more differences there were, the more information would be exposed. Some things were better left unsaid. If it was a party, it seemed that she had to bring an extra suit with her. Because he was moving with the Almighty, he had to pay attention to certain things. To avoid getting more and more information that could be used against me, hence, the next day, when she woke up early, she met Director Huang and Manager Li and received the set of cleaning uniform. She didn't show any signs of familiarity. Instead, he was like a novice in disguise, struggling for half an hour before coming out of the changing room. Qin Mo was already waiting on the sofa. Although he was wearing a cleaner's uniform, it didn't reduce his nobility. Instead, because of the blue and white uniform, he was especially eye-catching. Bojo arched a brow, her lips lifting into a smile. She whistled. "Handsome." Qin Mo glanced up at the youngster. Her head was still covered with a head of messy silver hair. She looked like a princess who had just showered, shaking her hair to attract his attention. "Come over." Qin Mo's voice was calm. When Bojo walked over, he stood up, placing his fingers on the youngster's head. His long fingers tidied her silver hair, the contours of his face similar to his voice, carrying a hint of nobility and aloofness. "You're already so old and you don't even know how to comb your hair." Manager Li and Director Huang were still at the side. The latter was already used to it since he had always been bullied in the police station. The former didn't know if he should look at the two of them or somewhere else. Young Master Qin was so blatant with his homosexuality. Bojo glanced up. She didn't think much of it since he was just combing her hair. Qin Mo didn't think much of it either. Wasn't it natural for him to do such things for the person he wanted to raise? Because they were so close to each other. Bojo could see clearly that when the Almighty lowered his lids, his eyelashes were like black feathers. They swept over her, tempting her to reach out and touch them. The reason Qin Mo lowered his lids was because he was tidying someone's collar. Bojo was different from Qin Mo and it could be seen from the way they dressed. The youngster's style was always casual and cool. On the other hand, Qin Mo's clothes were straight and clean. With such a sense of abstinence, a thought would enter Bojo's mind from time to time. She wasn't sure if she wouldn't be able to control herself and do something that would cause her endless trouble when she left. Bojo adjusted her collar. "Tight?" Qin Mo asked. Bojo replied, Qin Mo reached out, adjusting it slightly. Manager Li coughed. "Young Master Qin, young Master Zhou, it's only 7 a.m. Do you want to have breakfast before heading over?" "It's fine, we'll be eating with our new colleague." Bojo smiled, a hint of mischief in her voice. "It's easier to get information at the dining table." Manager Li. He hadn't expected young Master Qin to like this style. Besides, managerly, you don't have to follow us, just find an ordinary employee from the Human Resources Department. Don't reveal our identities. The more clueless they are, the more natural they will be. Bojo sat on the chair, bending down to tie her shoelaces. When she glanced up, she was already a refreshed cleaner. Both Chin Mo and Bojo had made some changes to their appearances, basically to lower their attractiveness. Chin Mo's face was too handsome, it wasn't easy to change. They could only start with the hairstyle. They couldn't tell if it was green or blue, but it dyed the strands of hair in front, giving it a hint of non-mainstream appeal. This was more like the youngster who had left home during his Chunibyo period. But the advantage was that his face was good, it didn't look too ugly. Most importantly, it could change his aura, especially Chin Mo's. This way, people wouldn't be resistant. The Jiang group treated their employees well, hence, the dormitory wasn't too bad. But this was Jiang City, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, so they couldn't expect it to be good. The rooms weren't facing the sun, most of them were from other places, and it was an old building that hadn't been demolished. There were all sorts of clothes hanging on the railings and the smell wasn't good. From the first floor to the second, there was the smell of mold. Bojo wasn't bothered by her surroundings. She had assumed that a noble young master like the Almighty wouldn't be able to take it. But when she turned back, she realized that the Almighty's expression hadn't changed. He had blended in perfectly with the surroundings, just that he didn't speak much. He was as indifferent as ice to the employee who had brought them here, who was winking at him. That was when Bojo remembered that the Almighty had mentioned that he had grown up in the military. Even if he had forgotten the days they had spent together, it should be true. Which meant that the Almighty had probably received special training. Bojo smiled. That would be the year she had first crossed hands with the Almighty. It wasn't strange that she had been discovered. On the other hand, the employee's face turned cold when the handsome newcomer ignored her. He was just a migrant worker. She had seen plenty of arrogant people, but in the end, he had still succumbed to reality. Forget it, she didn't want to force him. This is the room. The employee stood outside the door with a key in her hand. There are 2 beds left, split them and see who sleeps. Just as the employee was speaking, a few men stood outside the door, washing up. The few men who were standing in the public area to wash up all looked over. After all, it was rare to see such a good-looking youngster here. Actually, the structure of the building was similar to the underground cellars in the capital. In the underground cellars, washing up was shared and there would be a queue when there were many people. Manager, where did these 2 come from? One of the middle-aged men spat the mouthwash in his mouth into the sink. He glanced over and laughed heartily, carrying with him the warmth of a foreigner. He was probably from around here since his accent hadn't changed. Many people said that the city was developing too quickly and that people would become apathetic due to the pressure. However, this problem didn't exist for the middle-aged man who wanted to work and earn his hard-earned money. He was very passionate. The employee replied calmly, "They are temporary workers from outside and are in charge of cleaning. You can bring them along today and see if they are suitable." "Sure." "Oh right." The employee seemed to have thought of something, pointing towards Bojo's hair. "If you really want to keep them, make your hair color more normal. Our nightclub is different from the other nightclubs, we have high standards for our employees." Bojo didn't know that nightclubs regulated their employees' hairstyles. Jiang's management was rather interesting. "All right." The employee glanced over at Chin Mo. The employee glanced at Chin Mo again. Seeing that he didn't react, she couldn't be bothered with him and headed downstairs. No one in the tube-shaped apartment suspected Chin Mo and Bojo because of their daily behavior. But since they were new, there weren't many people who came over to talk. There were some who stayed in the same room. The middle-aged man walked towards Bojo with a basin. After taking 2 glances, he said with pity, "How old are you? Why are you working at such a young age? Why aren't you studying properly?" "Don't worry, big brother, I'm already an adult." Bo-jio smiled. "I'm just a little hungry. I've been away from home for a long time and I want to eat something hot." The middle-aged man immediately said, "Let's go in and put your things down. I'll introduce you to the people in the same room and then we'll go eat together. The canteen made big mantu today, I'm sure you'll like it. She likes to eat everything." At this moment, Chin Mo spoke. His magnetic voice attracted the middle-aged man's attention. "Do you know each other?" Bo-jio smiled. "We came out to work together. There's no work at home." Her talent in imitating language was unparalleled. She had only heard a few sentences and she had already learned the intonation. The setting of a young internet addict that he had made up at the beginning was now useless. She might as well mix the truth with falsehood to make it easier for others to believe her. The middle-aged man heard Bo-jio's accent and felt closer to her. "That's right, there's no work at home. Come, these are the 2 beds. It's the same as some schools, bunk beds. The one beside you is also from our hometown. One of them doesn't have good hearing so he has to raise his voice when he speaks. The other one loves to drink and the last one doesn't live here anymore. I don't know where he got his money from but he will definitely bring us alcohol and cigarettes when he comes back." The big brother was really passionate towards Bo-jio and the others. In order to avoid suspicion, Bo-jio gave a brief explanation of everyone's situation. In reality, her focus was on the last one. Chin Mo glanced up and glanced at the bed with the half-folded blanket. The 2 of them exchanged glances. They had a tacit understanding. It's the weekend and everyone is working the whole day. He will definitely be back soon. You guys are in luck. The middle-aged man didn't know that it wasn't a matter of luck. Chin Mo and Bo-jio had chosen to sneak over today because they knew that everyone was working the whole day. The 2 of them were led to the canteen by the big brother. The canteen was extremely noisy. Fortunately, the phone the big brother was using was made in China and the volume was very loud. The moment he glanced up, he saw Chin Mo and Bo-jio's target. Xiao Debao. Xiao Debao was tall and sturdy. If Bo-jio and Chin Mo hadn't come, he would have been the youngest cleaner. He was eating his mantu in big mouthfuls when he saw 2 unfamiliar faces. He frowned. Chin Mo took note of her reaction. They are on guard. Their first reaction is to suspect us. That was why one shouldn't provoke a psychologist. Subtle expressions could read one's mind. Xiao Debao was actually afraid but he felt that even if the police were to investigate, they wouldn't be able to trace it back to a cleaner like him. But the supplier warned them to be more vigilant. "These 2, the big brother replied passionately, "We are from the same hometown. There isn't much work at home so we came out to earn some money." They came to Jiang City to earn money at such a young age. Xiao Sanbao sized up the 2 of them. Bo-jio and Chin Mo allowed him to size them up. The former scratched her head in embarrassment. She didn't take the initiative to speak to Xiao Sanbao. Instead, she asked the middle-aged man, "Big brother, where do we get the mantu? My cousin and I are about to starve to death." Xiao Sanbao had his own thoughts. If there was someone here who would listen to him completely, he would be able to release the mantu from the other washrooms at the same time. The 2 of them didn't seem to be a problem. It would be better to rope them in after some time. With that in mind, Xiao Sanbao took out his food card. "I have mantu, you don't have a food card. Take it, Brother Xiao is treating you." "This." Bo-jio glanced at the food card but didn't take it. "Brother Xiao is giving it to you, just take it." The big brother was always enthusiastic. Chapter 921. 7 to 800 a day. Is there really such a good business? Bojo's eyes lit up, but she was still hesitant. That's impossible. Zhao Sanbao knew that the two of them were inexperienced. The more inexperienced they were, the easier it would be for them to help him. Why is it impossible? Brother Zhao will tell you the truth. He sells cigarettes and earns the difference in price. Cigarettes? Bojo lowered her lids, a smile on her face. We'll follow Brother Zhao from now on. Sure. Zhao Sanbao also had other reasons for using these two people. Recently, the police had been too strict. It was relatively safer to let these two people stand guard. The most important thing was that if there was any sudden inspection, he could let these two people stand guard for him and let them carry the goods. If the situation was not right, he could still escape. At 1:30 p.m., Zhao Sanbao found someone to cover for him. He brought the two of them out of the shop. This was the perfect time to take the goods because there would be a cleaning at 6 p.m. He could take the opportunity to place more goods. It had to be said. The drug dealers at the bottom of the hierarchy would always choose places that no one would expect. In an alley near Yisei, there were many people coming and going. All kinds of people were from other places who came here to work. It was a temporary factory that was still under construction. On the right was a makeshift house. Zhao Sanbao didn't allow them to follow. Wait here. Okay, Brother Zhao, Bojo replied. The two of them looked at Zhao Sanbao's back as he left, then looked at each other. Cousin, do you have a lighter and cigarettes? Qi Nemo knew she had something to say. He took out a pack of cigarettes and placed one between his lips. He took out a pack of cigarettes and put a cigarette between his lips. It was windy. Bojo lowered her body and leaned over. It's not a small place, but it should be their distribution department. Qi Nemo replied, watching as the youngster lit the cigarette. His voice was calm. You know quite a lot. Qi Nemo replied. He watched as the youngster lit his cigarette and said faintly, you know quite a lot. Bojo paused and laughed. I'm smart and handsome. At this moment, Qi Nemo wouldn't ask too much about it. They had a basic tacit understanding. They would first deal with the outside before dealing with the inside. He threw us here to test us. Qi Nemo took a puff of his cigarette and reached out to pinch the youngster's face. He looked very handsome. Keep your shameless words to yourself. Bojo didn't expect her face to be pinched. She held the cigarette in her mouth in a daze. Then she arched a brow and reached out to rub her face. The two men did not call or inform anyone that they were there. It was because the angle they were standing at was facing the glass window of the simple room. This made it easy for the people inside to observe the people outside. Zhao Sanbao definitely wouldn't let them stand in this position casually. As expected. Inside the simple room, a man with tattoos pulled open the blinds and looked at Bojo. You still dare to bring someone here when the limelight is so close? They don't know anything. They're just two country bumpkins who have never seen the world. They can't imagine what we're doing. Also, look at their outfits. They're so young. They can't be police. The tattooed man narrowed his eyes and put on his mask. He didn't say anything else. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was being broadcasted to the crime squad. Zhao Sanbao would never have expected Bojo to plant a small listening device on him the moment they first met. Now, there were more than 10 cars with police plates removed. They were waiting for the right time to act. Chapter 922. The tattooed man's phone rang. There was only one message on it. There's something wrong with the person in front of you, there's an ambush around, hurry up and retreat. The tattooed man narrowed his eyes, his expression changing. He pulled Xiao Sanbao over, his gaze fierce. Xiao Sanbao didn't understand. The tattooed man inhaled deeply, patting his face lightly. Get the two brothers outside to come in, let's have a good talk. Since there was an ambush, he had to think of a way to save his life. It was safest to have one or two hostages. Xiao Sanbao didn't know what had happened. He was still saying, is it safe to let them in? What if they know something and go out and spread the news? Go get them. At this moment, the tattooed man didn't think Xiao Sanbao was being considerate. Instead, he felt that there was something wrong with his identity, which was why he didn't want innocent people to be implicated. Xiao Sanbao didn't mind, he walked out and waved towards them. Qi Nemo threw the cigarette but into the rubbish bin, his voice calm. There's something wrong. Indeed. Bo Jio's gaze dimmed. The two of them stuffed a hand into their pockets, walking through the sand, looking suave. Xiao Sanbao was still thinking about how to get the goods. He hadn't expected his two underlings to enter. Someone locked the door behind them. Ka-cha. The tattooed man glanced up at the three of them, his gaze sending a chill down Xiao Sanbao's spine. Brother Long, this is... Before Xiao Sanbao could finish his sentence, the tattooed man whipped out a gun, causing his face to turn pale. Brother Long, the tattooed man was still wearing a mask, speaking slowly. There's something wrong with one of you. Xiao Sanbao instinctively turned towards Bo Jio and the others. Brother Long, I'm stupid, I really didn't expect them to be suspicious. The person I'm talking about. The tattooed man raised his hand. You. Xiao Sanbao's legs turned to jelly when the gun was pointed at him. When he had been transporting the drugs, he hadn't considered the possibility of being devoured by the evil dragon. Brother Long, how could there be a problem with me? The tattooed man didn't listen to him at all. He said coldly, search him. Yes. The person next to him pressed Xiao Sanbao against the wall and scanned his body with a seemingly simple but professional metal scanning device. Beep beep beep. When the voice rang out, Xiao Sanbao had no idea what was going on. What is this? The tattooed man's eyes turned cold. And you say you're fine. There was a cracking sound. His shoes trampled over it heavily. Listen to me, Brother Long, you, bang. Before Xiao Sanbao could finish his words, the bullet directly pierced through his chest. It was as if killing a person was nothing to the tattooed man. However, he did not want to make a move here. After all, this was not the Golden Triangle. It would be very troublesome to be targeted by the police. However, Xiao Sanbao had been in contact with him for too long. If he had really been bribed by the police and revealed his information, it would not be safe. It was better to kill him. At this moment, Bo Jio and Qin Mo didn't move. They were like two inexperienced kids who were shocked by the situation in front of them. Boss, what do we do after we catch them? The person at the side asked. What about the two of them? The tattooed man wiped his gun. Scan them too. See if there are any problems. Yes. When the scanner slid past Bojo, Qin Mo's gaze wavered slightly. Boss, there's nothing. Boss, there's nothing. Nothing. Even Qin Mo arched a brow and looked towards the youngster. No one else could see their exchange of glances. Bojo lowered her head. She didn't say a word, but the smile that covered her trembling lips showed that she had been prepared for this. That's right, the tapping device on her body had already been transferred to the underling when he pushed her into the room. And without anyone noticing, the tattooed man glanced at Xiao Sanbao, who was lying on the ground. Carry this person out. Lock the two of them up as hostages. There are police outside. They can be used as life-saving amulets. If the tattooed man had seen Chin Mo before, he would never have made such a decision. He would never make such a decision. Instead, he would just raise his gun and kill him. It was a pity he didn't know how difficult it was to deal with the two people he had decided to tie up. The key case investigation unit saw everything that happened here, including the gunshot. At this moment, none of the crime squad members had reacted as deeply as Director Huang. How had he noticed something was wrong? And it was Chin Mo who had thrown out the bait. When Chin Mo and the others had just arrived, they had sent him a message, asking him to create an identity for Zhao Sanbao and announce it to everyone, saying that he was a police informant. The news had only been out for a short period of time and the other party had already found out about their actions. What did that mean? It meant that everything was as Chin Mo had said. There was a problem in the crime squad. Director Huang's gaze dimmed. His mood wasn't good enough. At this moment, the newly arrived criminologist was still boasting, now that there's a problem with the informant, it's enough to show how cruel the drug trafficker is. I'll ask my friend in America to investigate his background. However, based on the analysis of his behavior, a typical local wouldn't be so cruel. He looks like a desperado, so we must not let him escape. As for the two hostages, go and check if they're really innocent. Who knows, it might be a trick played by the other party. Director Huang bolted upright. We have to ensure the safety of the hostages, everything else is a small matter. Are you saying that such a huge drug trafficking case is a small matter? The psychologist questioned before raising his hands. I understand. We have to protect them first, let's talk about the rescue plan. Director Huang knew that he wasn't on the same wavelength as the foreigner, hence, he alighted from the command car, heading towards the scene. In the simple house, Chin Mo and Bo Jiao were tied together with a rope. Their legs weren't tied because they still had to be brought along. Boss, what should we do? Are there policemen everywhere? One of them seemed to be panicking. The tattooed man raised his gun, leaning against the window as he watched the commotion outside, his lips curling into a vicious smile. Get a megaphone, we can negotiate with them. The man obeyed, his palms sweating due to his nervousness. What are you afraid of? Don't you know how many bombs are buried around here? A vicious glint flashed past the tattooed man's eyes. We'll blow up anyone who enters. Bo Jiao and Chin Mo, who were tied together, glanced down. They seemed to have a telepathic connection. Their gazes were in the same direction. It was a small remote control on the table. There wasn't a television or air conditioner in the room. This meant that the remote control was the key. Bo Jiao and Chin Mo had always done things differently. If not, Bo Jiao wouldn't have changed Director Huang's arrangements and moved the listening device. The tattooed man's words were clearly heard by Director Huang. This time, only Director Huang could hear the contents of the listening device. Hence, it was a top secret. But it was this sentence that sent chills down Director Huang's spine. He immediately turned to the people who were about to rush in. Stop the mission, stand by. What's the situation? Director Huang, we have to hurry to save the hostages and catch the culprit. Time is of the essence. The new criminologist was dressed in a suit, looking out of place. Director Huang knew that there was a spy in the crime squad, but he couldn't reveal the fact that there were bombs in the construction site. Because once he revealed it, the other party would suspect young Master Qin and the youngster's identity. If they were hostages, there wouldn't be any danger. But if they were from the police, the tattooed man would definitely kill one of them. But if they didn't say anything, how were they going to start the rescue? Or, could they only trust in that person's ability? They weren't sure where the bombs were buried. But there were more than 30 workers at the construction site. Even if they wanted to evacuate, they would need time. The radius of the explosion couldn't be predicted. What was more worrying was the kindergarten beside the construction site. Director Huang reached out to grab the few strands of hair he had left. Report to the higher-ups, it's classified, I'll report the current situation to General Qin. They had to send the special forces over. Then they would choose a long-range kill. They needed a sniper. However, before Director Huang could pick up his phone, a Special Forces soldier dressed in camouflage jumped down from a Land Rover, carrying a long black bag on his back. Director Huang. You are. Director Huang couldn't remember such a person. The Special Forces soldier was a man of few words. Art Wolf, young Master Qin sent me over, I think Director Huang needs a sniper. With that, he reached his hand out, allowing Director Huang to take a look at his unit number. It was the lightning symbol. Only those in high positions would know what it meant. It was the symbol of the International Special Forces. Why was it here? Director Huang straightened his back, wanting to explain the situation. Aardwolf glanced sideways and said in a calm tone, I already know. I need you guys to lure the other party to the window during the negotiation. However, it depends on the situation. Young Master Qin said that this person is a very important breakthrough point. Try to capture him alive. I will act according to the situation. With that, Aardwolf tore open the bag. It was an inch-caliber sniper rifle. Under ideal circumstances, it could shoot a human head at a distance of 2,000 meters without any adjustments. Give the order. Director Huang, who had been robbed of the chance to speak, finally believed that Qin Mo had sent them over. But more importantly, how did he know the drug dealers were negotiating with the police? Aardwolf frowned, placing the rifle down. The window is too small, it will be difficult to stop them, we might not be able to kill them. Director Huang's face fell. There are schools nearby. Director Huang. Aardwolf lowered his voice. At such a time, we can only trust young Master Qin. Director Huang stilled. Indeed, at such a time, he could only trust that person. He was the person who could single-handedly subdue a serial killer when he was still in high school. The new criminologist also recognized the gun that Coyote was carrying. At this moment, he was much quieter. Hence, he became much quieter as he realized something wasn't right. It was obvious that his realization had come a little late. No one in the simple house cared about the two people who were trembling in fear. The tattooed man had a total of 5 subordinates, all of them moving the goods and money. Be it the money or goods, it was a staggering amount. They were packed in luggage, piling on top of each other. Hence, they wouldn't notice the blade protruding from Bojo's sleeves. The blade was small, but it was useful in such a situation. The only person who noticed the youngster's movements was Qin Mo. Both of them had a tacit understanding. The moment Bojo moved, Qin Mo's long legs bent over, blocking her perfectly. Even if someone glanced over, they would see Qin Mo and not Bojo's movements. To Bojo, handcuffs were more convenient than ropes. After all, in such an era, few people would use ropes to tie people up. Simply put, she was good with machinery. Returning to the most primitive method required some time. Qin Mo took one look at the youngster's expression and knew she wasn't good with it. He moved his fingers, signaling for her to pass the blade to him. Bojo arched a brow. They touched. Strangely, when the blade was in the Almighty's hands, sparks seemed to fly. In less than 10 seconds, the ropes around her hands loosened. The two of them didn't stand up immediately after regaining their freedom. Qin Mo swept a glance at the two men holding the rifle before his gaze landed on the remote control. Bojo nodded. The next moment, they stood up simultaneously. The person closest to them was about to raise his gun when Chin Mo swept his long legs and leaned forward. The blade landed heavily on the person's wrist that was holding the gun. Ah! The person screamed in pain, attracting everyone's attention. The other man also raised his gun, but it was too late. The young man raised his leg and kicked the man's right hand accurately. Then, with a loud crack, the other party's knees bent, and he fell to the ground. After that, the two of them dodged to the left at the same time. It was because the tattooed man had turned around and fired 2 shots at them. The youngster's movements were always beautiful and smooth. The tattooed man cursed. His first reaction was to reach for the remote control. At this moment, Chin Mo was already holding the gun. Just as the tattooed man was about to raise his hand, he fired a shot. Bang! The gunshot fired in all directions. The tattooed man retracted his hand in pain. The youngster kicked the wall with her long leg. Using the recoil, she pounced forward, her palms on the table. With a somersault, she managed to grab the remote control. Chapter 9:23. There was a loud swoosh. It came from the blade in Chin Mo's hand. When it flew out, it was bound to cut his fingers. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a point of impact. But it was the wrist that was holding the gun that was cut. Ah! A painful cry rang out. The two men held on to their right hands. Just as they were about to raise their guns again, Chin Mo's gun was pointed at the tattooed man. Chin Mo's gun was already aimed at the tattooed man on the ground. He stood there, his left hand holding the gun. His right hand was dangling, blood dripping from his fingertips. However, this didn't affect his unique nobility. You don't want your boss to live. They were just 2 underlings after all. The moment they saw their boss being pointed at with a gun, they froze on the spot. The tattooed man clenched his teeth tightly. Even the remote control had fallen into the hands of the other party. This matter had cut off his last path of escape. His face was filled with unwillingness and hostility. Who exactly are you? Be it the youngster's skills or that beautiful flying knife, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. They weren't even policemen. The tattooed man hadn't expected to land in someone's hands. He had been living a carefree life for so many years and had never suffered a setback. Moreover, he was in a continent with such low efficiency. Even though it was difficult for them to move the goods in terms of safety, in terms of skills and setup, as long as it wasn't the special forces, no one would be able to do anything to them. Outside the simple room, Director Huang was still worried. He could still hear sounds a moment ago, but after the gunshot, there must have been a problem with the listening device as all he could hear was the sound of gunshots. But he had forgotten that they had a sniper. Aardwolf saw everything through the hole, calmly placing his gun down. Young Master Chin has gotten the remote control, the drug traffickers are under control. Director Huang, give the order. Director Huang stilled. A second ago, he had been restless, thinking about how to mediate the crowd and minimize the damage. This second, his emotions were indescribable. How strong were the 2 youngsters to be able to survive in such a short period of time? Director Huang didn't waste any time, giving the order immediately. The crime squad members split into 2 groups, rushing into the simple room. Aardwolf, who had set up his sniper rifle, had already left the scene, as if he had never been there. In the Land Rover, the man with the code name Magician wasn't in disguise today. He was dressed in military camouflage and looked extremely handsome. Where's young master? I'm fine. Aardwolf's answer had always been concise. Magician pursed his lips. I say, can't you say something more? For example, what's the situation with young master? Do we need to follow up, or? Coyote glanced at him and interrupted, retreat. Don't even think about marrying a wife like this. Aardwolf reacted to magician's words. He hesitated for a moment and decided to gossip. Young master is with that boy. Which boy? Fatty, who was sitting at the back of the car, straightened his back. If he didn't stick his head out, no one would be able to tell that he looked different in his military uniform. Aardwolf glanced at the crowd with his indescribable eyes. That boy. Everyone understood this sentence. Fatty's neck stiffened. It can't be, young master has already shown off his love to such an extent that he's even bringing little Spade when he's doing business. The atmosphere in the car was too quiet. After all, none of them had expected that the first person to be single would be their boss. Wasn't that desireless man destined to become a monk? They had originally thought that even if they weren't at the starting line, they would at least be better than their boss in terms of finding a wife. What was going on? Was young master really moved? On this side, the few old men were still sighing about the impermanence of the world. On the other side, the viciousness in the tattooed man's eyes became more obvious. He was determined to get an answer so that he could take revenge in the future. However, he didn't know that he wouldn't have any chance to take revenge in the future. After the key case investigation unit came in, they handcuffed all of them. The tattooed man looked at Chin Mo. Why? You dare to arrest me but don't dare to tell me your name. Chin Mo finally glanced at him, his tone calm. Is a loser worth telling me his name? With that, the tattooed man's face contorted in anger. Bo Jio only had one thought. Why did he have to resort to violence? In the future, she would let the Almighty do it with his mouth. At this moment, the tattooed man smirked coldly. Do you really think that you have one? You are so arrogant just because you have the remote control. Go tell your superior to release me immediately, otherwise, someone will blow this place up in half an hour. What do you mean? Director Huang frowned. The tattooed man glared at Chin Mo. If you want to know why, get this person to call me Grandpa. You. Director Huang had never seen such an arrogant criminal. The tattooed man had never been bothered by them. Even though he had been arrested, he knew deep down that as long as he had something on him, the other party wouldn't dare to do anything to him. Why aren't you calling me? Or do you think that someone will be able to remove all the bombs in half an hour? The tattooed man was handcuffed, but he didn't seem to be bothered by the people in front of him. Even within their organization, there was someone who held a high position. What could these small fries do? To put it bluntly, the Chinese were no different from pigs in his eyes. But the next second, the tattooed man's gleeful expression disappeared. It wasn't because of anything else but the silver-haired youngster's light chuckle. It's just a remote control software and you want the Almighty to call you Grandpa. As expected, losers like to dream. With that, the tattooed man turned abruptly. The youngster had already removed the remote control. She was looking at him with a dark gaze, as though the malice in her eyes was stronger than his. But even so, the tattooed man wasn't completely afraid. You found out. Heh, seems like you aren't that dumb. But so what if you found out? This activation software isn't something that can be easily deciphered. Is that so? Bo Jio stood up, stuffing a hand into her pocket. She glanced at him and smiled. That's a pity, I was fortunate enough to be one of the people who could decipher it. What? The tattooed man's expression changed, his eyes narrowing. His first reaction was disbelief. How was that possible? The program was created by that person. Unless he was one of the top 5 hackers in the world, it wouldn't be possible to decipher it. Huang, do you have a notebook? Bo Jio hesitated for a long while before deciding to call Director Huang. She didn't call him little because she wanted to save Director Huang some face since there were so many people watching. Director Huang didn't seem to feel that the youngster was saving his face. He coughed heavily, his voice rough. Are you really confident? Director Huang had his considerations. This wasn't a small matter and he couldn't make a rash decision. The new criminal psychologist had his own plans as well. The remote control is very intricate. I think we should wait for a professional to come. What about the time? Qin Mo asked calmly. This made the man look over. Since there's no time, let's do as that desperado says. Mister, you probably don't understand, but I'm an expert in psychology. People like him will really do what they say, because in his eyes, human lives are nothing. It seems like there's someone who understands the situation. The tattooed man's lips lifted in delight. That makes things easier. Qin Mo didn't even glance over, turning towards Director Huang. Notebook. Director Huang gritted his teeth. I'll send it over right away. Smith, who was dressed in a suit, was annoyed. Sir, did you hear what I said? I said, I know a little about psychology. Qin Mo interrupted him. This is China, my country. Do you think it's possible for my first criminal to come and leave so arrogantly? Mr. Smith, you probably don't know who I am, but there's a saying in China that you might be familiar with. With that, Qin Mo glanced up, his voice calm but piercing. Those who offend China will be punished no matter how far they are. Smith choked on his words and didn't say anything. The people standing around were all Huaxia natives. Who didn't have some hot-blooded manliness? How could they let him go just like that? If they didn't take a gamble, they would be letting down their clothes. At this moment, Director Huang had a backbone. No matter what Mr. Smith said, he would treat it as bullshit. Smith didn't know what else to say. More importantly, the other party knew who he was, but he hadn't received any information about him. Bo Jiao swept him a glance. Once she returned to the Fifth Avenue, the first person she would harass had to be Smith. That's right, Bo Jiao knew the expert in front of her. Smith hadn't even seen her once since they started fighting. How dare he claim to know her? What was even more unbelievable was that he had even mentioned psychology in front of the Almighty. This kid was really asking for trouble. Wasn't he going to rebuke him? Bo Jiao chuckled lightly, taking a notebook from the crime squad. Her light laughter made the tattooed man's palms sweat uncontrollably. Ka-cha. Who knew what the youngster was thinking? She tilted her head and lit a cigarette. Just as everyone was looking over, Bo Jiao made a new move. The metallic lighter transformed into another form when the youngster lit the cigarette. The USB port was plugged into the laptop. Isn't that a lighter? Director Huang asked curiously. Bo Jiao passed the cigarette to him and smiled devilishly. It's a lighter, but it can be used as a USB drive when necessary. Director Huang was in disbelief. He glanced down at the thing that didn't look like a USB drive at all. The intricate patterns extended into the shape of a dragon and snake, giving off an indescribable aura. Where did this ninth young master get his hands on it? But this wasn't the time to be curious. More importantly, he had to use the remote to hack into the other party's computer and destroy the software used to control the bomb. That was the only way for everything to be safe. But could young Master Zhou really do it? Director Huang had heard many ridiculous stories about the youngster in the past. One of the stories was about how the youngster had been sent to the hospital after chasing a man. Director Huang felt uneasy. No one knew what the outcome would be. Time was still moving. This meant that danger was approaching. It's useless. Do you think you can just find anyone who knows how to run a computer? The tattooed man's voice rose. Click, click, click. The rhythmic tapping of the keyboard seemed to be used to shut him up. It was extremely fast. It was so fast that the youngster couldn't even see the words on the screen. Countless chat boxes opened at the same time, as though they were working on something. The youngster continued to type while explaining, the program will leave traces of the other party's IP address. Use the surrounding computers to help me find them. Why? How? Director Huang had never seen anyone operate in such a manner, even as the director of the crime squad. The youngster lowered his lids. When his silver hair fell down, the corners of his lips curled up, revealing his canine teeth. It's simple. The speed of a computer depends on its operating memory. Take out all the memory and use it together. That way, it'll be fast. Oh, found it. Found it. Director Huang couldn't understand what had popped up, but there was indeed a chat box paused on the screen. The next second, the youngster's fingers flew across the keyboard as though she was playing Chopin. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, after images visible as she lifted her hands. She was like a diving eagle, nothing could stop her from invading and hunting. Right at this moment, the youngster paused, her beautiful brows arched. Director Huang started to panic. What is it? The other party has set up a special firewall, Bojiu replied as she typed. It will take some time to crack it. The tattooed man stood at the side. He had been through a lot. He glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and laughed mockingly. Director Huang, I've told you before, the software isn't something anyone can crack. There are still 24 minutes left. If I were you, I would change your mind. There's no need to change my mind. Bojiu glanced up. This level of firewall can be cracked in 2 minutes. The tattooed man's face turned green, his fists clenched tightly. Do you think you won't be discovered once you enter the firewall? Do you know who is guarding it? Your boss. Bojiu chuckled, replying nonchalantly. That is indeed frightening, but I'm good at concealment. She won't be able to find me at this level. Director Huang. You don't seem the least bit afraid, Joe. The tattooed man understood that the youngster wasn't taking his words to heart. He wanted to see how long this fearless youngster could remain arrogant. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.